and the charter and ordinances that helps, and the charter and ordinances of the city of Boulder,
and the charter and ordinances of the city of Boulder,
and faithfully perform the duties of the office of a member of the planning board, which I am about to enter.
and faithfully perform the duties of the office of the planning board, which I am about to enter.
Congratulations, Kurt. Welcome to the planning board.
Thank you.
Our next order of business is nominating and electing planning board chair and vice chair for this coming year. We can approach this two ways. One is to do this now, even though Lisa, who would like to, who I will be nominating for vice chair, is not here and George is not here. Or we can put it off until the next meeting on April 18th when we will all be here, and then just nominate someone to be the temporary chair for today. And either one is fine. It's just a question of what people would like to do. Does anyone have a strong opinion one way or the other?
I don't think it would change the outcomes. Maybe we could just, I mean, does anybody think it would change the outcome if we wait?
Okay, then I would like, wait, there are rules about how to do this. Hold on, I got to get them. Laurel, hold on 1 second. I have them pegged on my, okay. Let's see, Laurel, do we do the chair or the vice chair first?
Generally the chair goes first.
Okay, all right. Would someone like to nominate someone to be chair?
I would like to make a nomination.
Please go ahead.
Sarah, I would like to nominate you to be chair, and I can speak to that now, or we can see if there are other nominations.
Are there any other nominations? Okay, so there's no second required. I would be out to accept the nomination. I don't know whether you need to speak to it or not. If you'd like to, you're welcome to. If you don't feel it, I think we could just go ahead and take the vote.
I'd be happy to speak to it briefly, if that's okay with folks.
Of course.
So I have thought about this a lot, and the things that I think that you want in a chair that I think Sarah will embody. You want someone who will show up. You want someone who will help to structure an efficient meeting, but also allow everyone to have their say. So not in such a hurry that people get cut off. Someone who will provide institutional knowledge and an informed perspective. Someone who is fair and respectful towards all viewpoints. Somebody who will not abuse the power of the chair to try to control outcomes. And someone who can faithfully represent all the viewpoints of the board, the full board, if they're called upon, for example, to speak to council. And I think Sarah will do a fine job at all of that. Additionally, she has the longest tenure on planning board, and it's our tradition that the person with the longest tenure typically is the chair. As vice chair last year, she helped John with structuring meetings and documenting outcomes in a way that was really great training and preparation for the role of chair this year. And, you know, anybody who has worked with Sarah knows that she does her homework on the issues that are before us. And all of that I respect and appreciate. I also want to say that, you know, as the planning board, we are most functional and most legitimate when we represent a wide range of viewpoints in the community and that we don't always agree. If we were just an echo chamber and always agreeing with each other, we would not faithfully represent our community, as we all know. So I think it's important for us with different viewpoints to support each other and have faith in each other and respect each other and work well together. And for all of these reasons, I'm very happy to nominate Sarah as chair.
Well, that's the nicest thing anyone has said about me in years. So thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Since we don't need a second, now we vote in alphabetical order or reverse alphabetical order. Laurel, is it okay if I do it in first name alphabetical order?
Yes.
Okay. Kurt, do you support my nomination?
Yes.
Thank you. Laura?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
ML? Yes. We'll take that as a yes. And
sorry,
Sarah,
tangled up in my cord. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Sarah is a yes. Thank you all. So now we're doing the nominations for vice chair, and I would like to nominate Lisa, who is not here. She did send an email to everyone yesterday or Friday, I can't remember which, indicating her interest in being vice chair. Is there anyone who wants to offer an alternative nomination? Okay, I didn't write anything wonderful about Lisa except to say I'm sure she'll be great, and so it'll be a very simple nomination. All right, so we'll go again alphabetical by first name. Kurt.
Yes.
Laura.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
ML.
Yes.
And Sarah is a yes. All right, we now have a chair and vice chair, which is very exciting. We are well on our way on our my 5th year and Kurt's 1st. So welcome, Kurt. All right, so now we have approval of minutes. Devin had sent out 3 different sets of minutes, one of which was withdrawn because it was, I believe, because it was not complete. And so we really have 2 sets of minutes, January 3rd and January 31st, to vote on, set for approval. Did everyone see the changes they expected to see in the versions that Devin has shared with us? Okay, all right, so where is Laurel? Laurel, do we need to make a motion or just vote? I can't remember.
Yes, you'll need to make a motion.
Okay, would someone like to make
for
a
each
motion?
one?
Would someone like to make a motion for approval of the January 3rd minutes? All right, I'll make a motion for approval of January 3rd minutes. I believe that means we need a second.
I will second.
Thank you. Does it have to be a voice vote or can it just be, I think, hands raised?
Either way is fine.
Okay, all who support approval, raise their hands. All right, 4 because Kurt was not there. January 31st, would someone like to make a motion to approve the January 31st meeting minutes?
I will move to approve the January 31st meeting minutes.
Great, thank you. And would someone like to second?
I'll second.
Thank you. And hands raised for approval of those minutes. All right, so 4. All right, we will be entering into public participation in a minute, but first Vivian is going to walk everyone, including the public, through the ground rules for participation in our planning board meetings.
Can you see my slide?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you everyone from the public for joining us today. My name is Vivian Castro-Wooldridge. My role in planning board meetings is to facilitate the public engagement parts. And I just want to really appreciate you for being here with us tonight. So we'll start with open comments after I've gone through some of the protocols. And there are 2 public hearings later in the agenda. But we want our participants to know that the city is really striving into a vision co-created by city staff and community for productive atmospheres for such public meetings, which we hope are meaningful and inclusive. And this vision is really designed to promote free conversation and dialogue, while also recognizing that we want to make sure that everyone participating feels safe and welcome. And we want to ensure that we make space for different viewpoints in our meetings, because we do believe it leads to more informed decision-making. And we have a lot more information on our website about the Productive Atmospheres vision. If you're interested in learning more, you can go to our website. There are a number of rules of decorum that are found in the Boulder Revised Code, and we have some general guidelines that are advisory in nature to share with all of our meeting participants this evening from the community as well as planning board and staff. We ask that all remarks and testimony raised tonight be related to city business. We will not allow any participant to make threats or use any other forms of intimidation against any person in this session. Obscenities, racial epithets, and other speech and behavior that disrupts the meeting or otherwise makes it impossible for us to continue in the moment is prohibited. And we do also ask that participants identify themselves by the name they're commonly known, and display your first and last name if possible. You can right-click on yourself and change your name if your last name is not appearing, for example, so that we can call on you and we know who's providing input. We're in the Zoom webinar format, which allows for participants from the public to speak at designated times. So we will not be turning on video for community members because of security concerns in this platform, but you can raise your hand to speak, and when it's your turn, we'll adjust the setting and you'll see the option to unmute yourself. There's no pre-existing list for signing up, so you do need to raise your hand at the appropriate time, and we'll be sure to let you know when that is. And on your screen, you'll see a couple different ways to do this. You'll see a horizontal menu with a hand that you can click on, and we'll know to call on you. If you're joining us by telephone, you can also dial *9, and it will also raise the virtual hand, and we'll be able to see it and know that you would like to speak. So if you have an expanded menu, you can also get to the raise hand by clicking on reactions. And that should do it for now. So thanks again for joining, and we'll be moving on to open comment. So I'll turn it over to you, Sarah.
Okay, thank you so much, Vivian. All right, if anyone from the public wants to speak in open comment on anything not related to our 2 public hearing items today, please raise your hand now. Our 2 public hearing items, one is a use review on an existing 4-building development at 4410, 4430, and 4440 and 4450 Arapahoe Avenue. The second is a public hearing on the proposed ordinance 8571, which has to do with ADUs. Vivian, do we have anybody who wishes to speak?
We do. We have Macon Coles, and Devin will show the timer. So
Okay.
Macon, you have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Planning Board. My name is Macon Coles. I live at 1726 Mapleton Avenue, and I want to welcome the newest member of the Planning Board, Kurt Nordbach. Planning Board members, Kurt, are constantly asked at concept and site review to critique and suggest changes that will make projects better, even adding requirements in the form of conditions. And this is one of 2 essential functions of your job. When I was appointed to serve on this board as a layperson without training in architecture or planning, I wondered how I could do a good job. And I was helped immensely in this when someone suggested to me that I should use the book, A Pattern Language, as a source book, a starting point for my understanding of each element of design presented to the Planning Board for review. The book consists of 253 patterns, each one of which has its own short chapter of 2 or 3 pages. It was put together by Christopher Alexander, a team of students and architects at the University of California in the 70s. Many of these short chapters relate to a specific design element of the very plans that you are reviewing, like small public squares or public outdoor rooms, courtyards which live, a cascade of roofs and different roof design, paths and goals, building fronts, activity pockets. In each pattern, first, there's a picture which shows an archetype for the pattern. And second, there's an introductory paragraph which sets the context of the pattern. And then there's a 2 or 3 sentence problem statement followed by a discussion of the many ways that that problem can be manifested in a building. And finally, a solution with diagrams. The patterns aren't a set of prescriptions. Look at them as a hypothesis that you can use to test elements in specific plans before you. Many of the patterns are archetypal, so deeply rooted in the nature of things that they will likely be part of human nature and the built environment as much in 500 years as they were when the patterns were described 45 years ago. The patterns provide language that describe essential elements of the built environment. They're related to each other and can be used to create an infinite variety of combinations. It is so important that we use a common language when talking about the built environment. From its publication in 1977, a pattern language was a course book used in architecture and planning schools across the country. So the ideas and language found here will be familiar to professionals who come before you. In welcoming you, Kurt, I want to let you know that a new volume of the pattern language will be arriving at 77 Delwood within a couple of weeks to welcome you to this important position you have. And thanks to all of you who serve on Planning Board. We really appreciate your service and your time and know what a burden it is.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, I see no other hands raised for this portion of the meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. One hand. Lynn Siegel.
Okay.
Devin,
ahead,
ready
Lynn.
with the timer? Go ahead, Lynn.
You're always going to see that. So just know that I'm always going to be there. Freezing cold. It's 40 degrees in my house so that my pipes won't freeze. And I'm waiting to get a ground loop heat pump to stop the war in Ukraine. Our gas just went up 75% in Boulder, 75% increase. I'd love to turn my lights on with gas, but I have issues with restoring my attic before I can get solar, so that I'm covering that too. Sadly, it takes a while. Meantime, I was looking at the landmarks board was reviewing another Stoke property, 2206 Pearl. This one's 1741 Walnut. I think it's approximately that address. And they've gotten bigger with their, the footprint of their units is 334 feet instead of 300 feet at 2206. So once again, this is just not a panacea of middle income housing. It is not. It is 80 to 120% of area median income for the first go around, right? And how long are you going to live in a 300 square foot place? As soon as the first person moves out, it's market rate. It's not permanently affecting the middle income that it's intended to. That's simply to get you to approve the project based on their, and give them subsidies for 43 parking, parking reduction. So just go to your conscience when you're making these decisions. Go to your conscience. You have guidelines and you need to follow them. The issues with the landmarks are going to be, well, we give them the landmarks, then they need to get something in return. No, they don't need to get something in return. Landmarks needs to decide, do we want that alley position? And we can revitalize our alleys at this rate because it faces the alley, the significant part of it. But please, people, really go deeply to your conscience when you're making these decisions. Jared is in big trouble now with the state housing thing. This is pushing growth like heroin on Boulder. It cannot continue. And if it goes, from Boulder, it goes to the county, it goes to the state, it goes nationally and internationally. Stop now. Stop already. Done.
Thank you, Lynn.
All right.
Okay, Sarah, over to you.
Any other hands up? Okay. We have no call-up items, which means we can move directly to the public hearing, the first public hearing. The first public hearing is a public hearing in consideration of a use review to allow personal service uses within an existing 4-building, approximate 47,000 square foot office park at 4410, 4430, 4440, and 4450 Arapahoe Avenue within the residential high RH4 zoning district. The site is within the Viewpoint Office PUD. This proposal is to allow personal service uses in addition to the existing professional, technical, and medical office uses and is reviewed under case number LUR 2022-00055. And Allison Blaine who is new to us, although not new to the planning department, will be the staff presenting. Charles, go ahead.
Thanks very much for the intro, Madam Chair, and welcome once again, Board Member Nordbeck. I'm very pleased to welcome Allison to Planning Board this evening for kind of her maiden voyage before the board. So she'll be presenting staff's analysis tonight, and Allison, feel free to take it away.
Thanks, Charles. Let me get set up here real quick. Let's see. All right, and hopefully you guys can see my screen. All right. Good evening, Planning Board members. It's nice to meet you all for the first time, and I look forward to working with you more in the future. This presentation is for a use review to allow personal services in an existing office park on Arapahoe Ave within an RH4 zone. In tonight's presentation, I will briefly cover the information that was provided in the staff memo, including the purpose of the use review and process, the existing site conditions and surrounding context, a description of the proposal for the site, and a key issue for discussion. Personal services is allowed in an RH4 zone, but must first be approved through a use review. Use review applications are reviewed by staff who evaluate the proposal and confirm that the proposed use will meet the conditions set forth in the use review criteria. Once staff has reviewed the impacts, recommendation is made to Planning Board. And this application is for a non-residential use within a residential zone, and therefore a decision is made by Planning Board at a public hearing. The project completed the necessary notice requirements per the code. Written notice was sent to property owners within 600 feet, and notice was also posted on the property. Staff did not receive any questions or concerns from the neighbors throughout the review. The subject site is approximately 3 acres and comprised of 2 parcels located at the southeast corner of Foothills Parkway and Arapahoe Ave. The site is also known as the Viewpoint Office Park and is made up of 4 office buildings. I've shown them here on the slide with the addresses. The total square footage of all 4 buildings is about 47,000 square feet. The site is zoned residential high 4, and the RH4 zone district is described as the high density residential areas primarily used for a variety of types of attached residential units, including without limitation apartment buildings and where complementary uses may be allowed. The site is also surrounded by some public, industrial, general, and agricultural zones, as well as some mixed density residential. As I indicated on the prior slide, this site is surrounded by some residential uses. To the southeast, ranges from low to medium density residential and moves to higher density residential as we move east on Arapahoe. To the north of the site, on the other side of Arapahoe, is the Boulder Community Health Medical Campus. And that brings us to the proposed project for this evening. Staff received 2 business licenses for acupuncture and massage therapy uses to operate within the Viewpoint Office Park. For some context, every new business is reviewed for zoning conformance through a business license application, which then allows staff to confirm that the use is permitted per the underlying zoning. In this case, the previous approvals for the existing office park did not anticipate these uses, but the underlying zoning does allow for such uses through the use review process. And therefore the applicant is applying for a use review to allow the inclusion of personal services within the site in an RH4 zone. Shown here on the slide is the definition of personal services. Personal service uses include uses that provide a convenience to the neighborhood. Specifically, we're looking at alternative healthcare providers such as physical therapy, massage, acupuncture, nutritionists, and other similar health and wellness services. The existing office park was approved through a PUD and a special review concurrently in 1991 that approved general offices, but specifically excluded medical and dental offices. At the time in 1991, the proposed uses were considered healing arts and were included in the medical office use. Therefore, these uses were not permitted as part of the original PUD and special review. In 1996, a use review was granted, which approved medical and dental offices on the first floor of one of the buildings, 4410 Arapahoe. And again, still at this time, the proposed uses were considered a medical office. And so there are some allowed uses in that first floor for massage therapy, acupuncture, those sort of uses included in personal service. And then last, in 2010, another use review was granted, which allowed medical and dental offices throughout all 4 buildings. However, at this point, about 2006, the code definitions changed to reclassify the healing arts as a personal services use instead of a medical use. So when we look at all the previous reviews on the site, that includes uses for offices, including professional, technical, and medical, and then some personal service uses on the first floor of 4410 Arapahoe. This project will help clean up that record and allow for more variety of uses throughout the site. The existing site has 4 two-story buildings, and the application does not propose any changes to the existing operating characteristics or the physical building form. Floor area and setbacks will not be changing as part of this proposal. The site has 158 parking spaces as required for the code for the 27 tenant suites. And the new uses will utilize those existing parking spaces as well as tenant spaces, and bike parking is also provided on site. The key issue for tonight is the proposal consistent with the use review criteria set forth in section 9.2.15? And staff finds that the proposal is consistent with the applicable use review criteria. Specifically, the proposed use is compatible with the character of the area, as the site is an existing office park, and that is not proposed to be changed. Additionally, it provides a service or convenience to the nearby community by offering healthcare options to nearby residents in those residential zones, and further complements Boulder Community Health just north to the site. And last, the inclusion of personal services will utilize the existing parking and tenant spaces, and therefore is not creating any additional adverse impacts. And that wraps up my presentation. I will open it up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Questions from the board? You just have to hit your raise hand button if you have questions. ML.
Thank you, Sarah. Allison, you might have answered these, but it flew past me, but let me ask them again and see, just in case you didn't address them. So the use that they're looking for is currently allowed on the ground floor of building A.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Do we know why it was not allowed either on the second floor of building A or in any of the other? Why was it so limiting originally?
I don't have that information at the top of my head. The previous, the disposition of approval for that use review just limited those uses to those medical uses to the first floor of one building. I'm guessing they might have had a business come in and they just wanted it in that one area, but they didn't go through the process at the time to allow medical offices in all 4 buildings.
Right. So we don't know what the logic was about that. And regarding the parking, do you have any data on how intense the use is of that parking lot?
I'm not certain if the parking lot is filled up. The property management is, the applicants are on the call and they can probably help answer those questions. I don't have that data on hand though.
But ML, I think one thing we would note is that just based on the calculation rates, at 1 per 300 square feet, the site requires 158 spaces and they're providing 158 spaces to the number. So it's
right. I guess I think it's fascinating that this RH4 through a PUD process kind of whittled its way out of providing housing. And, you know, this is really providing complementary healthcare services, not necessarily about the neighbors and the neighborhood. I would think that most people coming to that would drive. That's why I'm asking the questions. It just, I mean, it is what it is, right? The PUD granted it, and there we have it. But I thought I would try to understand the logic of how this got to where it is. But thank you for attempting answers at my questions that really, at the end of the day, right, aren't going to change how this proceeds. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other board members who have questions? Mark? And then Kurt, I'll come to you next. Yeah, Mark, you just have to get it up.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Okay. This may be a slightly inappropriate time, but as I reviewed this use review, it made me have two questions, and that is this just, well, one, it didn't feel like a particularly controversial use review. I anticipate we will approve this change of use tonight. My question is this just one of those things as part of the code, or does this fact that we're going through a public use review process on something that seems so innocuous and so almost unnecessary, should this have been a staff level approval, or does it betray some fault in the code, or is it just one of those things? So this is not a criticism, it's a curiosity to me that we're actually working on this. And Allison, thank you for a great presentation, and obviously a lot of work went into it. And so again, I'm just trying to find out kind of why we're here.
Yeah, it's a great question, Mark. I think the code's heart is in the right place from a regulatory perspective, where we want to make sure that we have heightened awareness and oversight on non-residential uses and residential zones. So I think the spirit and intent of the code is spot on, and I think it's served us well over the years. This is a very unique PUD from the early 90s, where, you know, ostensibly commercial office was developed in RH4. I can't claim to kind of piece back together the rationale at the time. It's certainly a bit of a unique review, and we see very few of these. So I think on the whole, requiring use review for non-residential uses in residential zones has served us well. This is definitely a bit of a unique situation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Kurt?
Yeah, thank you, Mark, for asking that. I have the same question. My question is about whether if we approve this, which I anticipate we would, does that persist even if the use lapses, or is it like other things where if it is no longer used for that use after a year, then the approval would lapse and it would need to be reapproved? Was that clear?
Yeah, typically use reviews do run with the land. If the use is expired or goes vacant for more than a year, a subsequent user would have to apply for a new use review.
Anyone else have a question? Okay, I actually have a question. I'm just wondering if you could walk us through the prioritization of the PUD, how the PUD overrides the zoning, and how or when or what are the triggers that might get us back to the originals, the underlying zoning of residential?
Or Charles, were you gonna?
No, go ahead, please.
Okay. Well, yeah. So this use review was triggered because of the underlying zoning, because of the high density residential. The PUD, or I guess I should say that the special review allowed a certain uses, including offices. So back then it was just general offices. So that would include our professional and technical offices. And then the additional reviews allowed for the medical and dental office uses. And so those were the uses that were approved through the special review. And then the personal services is being reviewed because of the underlying zoning. And because the previous reviews did not anticipate these personal service uses as we define them now, we would look at the current zoning instead of what the special review and PUD would have approved.
So does I guess I'm asking a slightly different question. I mean, I appreciate that explanation. Is there some point at which the PUD, if the land is sold, does the PUD expire and it goes back to being RH4, or then has to be utilized through the RH4 zoning requirements? Or I'm just sort of curious about that, because it's a lot of land used as office space.
It's a great question. I think the way to look at the PUD, it's like a modern site review. So it kind of continues to exist until it doesn't. And really the only way the PUD goes away is if, whomever owns the property chooses to rescind it and redevelop the property. Okay. So, again, it'll continue to persist until whomever owns it at the time decides that, they would want to entertain a different type of development on the site.
Okay, I appreciate that explanation. Laura?
So just to make sure I'm understanding what Charles just said correctly, because I think these are great questions. If the owners decided that they wanted to redevelop as residential, that's within their power to try to get rid of the PUD and go back to the underlying zoning. Well, that is good to know. And if the owners didn't know that before, they know it now. And it sounds like planning board would certainly be amenable to that happening. Not that we would try to encourage that or anything like that, but thank you.
Okay, any other questions from planning board? All right, then now is time to go to public comment on this proposal. If anyone wants to make a comment, please raise your hand, and then Vivian will take charge.
Great.
Vivian can't hear you for some reason. Try it again.
How about
now? Now we can hear you.
Great. So Kim Lord has her hand raised. You have 3 minutes. Ready with the timer.
Okay, great.
Vivian, we can hear you, but the sound quality is very poor, and I'm not sure why.
Maybe your plug went. Maybe you're slightly unplugged from the computer or something. All right. So Kim Lord, you have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
So actually, I'm presenting on behalf of the applicant. I'm not here for public comment. So there was a little bit of a glitch there, I think. So I'm here also with my clients and was going to give a really short presentation. So I think technically we're not part of the public comment. And I don't know, are you going to turn the camera on, Vivian, or how do we go about this?
Yeah, okay, so Sarah, I can promote Kim to panelist.
Okay.
And then were you expecting a presentation from the applicant? No? Are you open to it?
Of course, we're open to it, but we had thought there wasn't going to be one, but we're very happy to hear from the applicant.
Okay. And Kim can let me know once she's on the other side if there's anybody else that we should be moving over. You should be able to share your screen as well, Kim.
So I'm Kim Lord, and I'm a lawyer here in town with Packard Deer King, and I represent the applicant, the Viewpoint Ownership. Brian and Charlotte Schifrin are also on this call and are here for the applicant as well. I'm not expecting them to say anything unless the planning board has questions for them. Brian is the property manager, and his wife Charlotte is also an owner in the property, and they are both long-term Boulder residents. So, they are here, they are available, and we just wanted planning board to know that we're paying attention to this and we're involved, and I have my clients here. I don't have a whole lot I need to say on this because Allison was super prepared and did a great job. As you've heard already, this property has a quirky history. It is an old PUD from 1991. I love the little discussion that went on here with Charles Farrow, and I agree 100% with Charles that the PUD zoning is effectively there unless and until we would ever want it to go away. And it's kind of an interesting, quirky issue that tends to come up in Boulder where you have these zoning overlays. So we have this old PUD zoning, and then at some point medical dental were added. And at some point in this process, when we're going through these approvals, the land use code actually changed, and the definition of medical office changed and took out alternative healthcare providers and switched it over to personal services. So that's why we have this sort of glitchy situation with the property, is that there was actually a code change. And I think it was like in 2007, Allison actually researched this and told me. And that's how we end up with like one floor that has one level of personal service use and it not being available elsewhere. So the point of this use review is to clean up the record and make the uses allowed consistent throughout the building. And this whole situation came up when we had a new tenant who does acupuncture and Chinese medicine, Dr. Korka, who went into the city to get her business license. And she found out that her alternative health care provider use was no longer allowed in a medical building. So we end up with this glitchy situation. And thankfully, Allison, who I can't believe this is her first hearing, but she took a deep dive into the history of this, which isn't that easy to figure out, and coming up with like when the code was revised. And we were able to figure out, what happened with this change in the definition. And after her detective work, we were able to collaboratively, figure out what kind of application to submit and what was appropriate. So that's what we submitted. And our desire is to just clean up what is effectively a strange issue that's occurring here for alternative health care providers, which are actually an important use for this site. So we appreciate the work with the city, and we want this resolved so that Dr. Korka and any other prospective tenants in this category, won't have a problem in the future. So as Allison already said, there's no new construction, there's no change in hours, there's basically no change in anything that's going to be going on in the site. The parking's going to be the same, and that meets code, as Charles Farrow indicated. And so effectively, there's really not going to be any added impact by this use. I think Allison already covered the use criteria, and there's no added impact on the community here. This is an important complementary healthcare service for this area. And so it just makes sense. We're across the street from Boulder Community, and they're going to be referring patients to people like physical therapists, acupuncture, maybe massage, and all of those fall in under the personal services category. So we're here to ask Planning Board to approve this office complex for the additional personal service use, which would allow these alternative healthcare providers to go in. So just a couple of other comments. I think Mark McIntyre had an interesting question about why wasn't this a staff level review? And it's because we've got this weird overlay of the PUD with the residential district. And I don't think it was an unreasonable interpretation that staff made that said, yeah, you've got to go through this extra little hurdle because you have this RH zoning that's kind of overlaid with the PUD. So that's really it from us. I didn't think there was going to be a whole lot to present because Allison's memo was super thorough, and we feel like this is a pretty straightforward use application to clean up the record. I'm available to answer any questions you have. I have, as I indicated, Brian Schifrin's on this call, and he is the property manager for the site, and Charlotte Schifrin, his wife, is one of the owners. She doesn't have quite as much knowledge of the ins and outs of the leasing. But that's it. And we thank you for your time and hope that this use review will be approved by Planning Board.
Kim, thank you. Does anyone on Planning Board have a question for Kim, for the applicant? All right. I think my guess is we fully understand what's going on and what the request is of us. So if there's no other, Vivian, anyone else have their hand up for public comment? Okay.
No.
All right. Thank you. So we can now go into our discussion.
Actually, it looks like,
apologies. Yeah, Lynn Siegel's hand just popped up.
Okay.
Lynn, you have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Like I say, just always assume it's going to go up. I just want to be last. Yeah. What the deal here is that this project and this issue here involves what's really concerning me lately. The loss of Pharmaca Ideal. After Pharmaca on Pearl, after Army Surplus Store, thrift stores, services, even Teslas need tires. OK Tire, gone. We don't have any services centrally anymore. So where do we put, why are we putting more office to start with? And how does medical wellness, how is that more important than having a local community drugstore? That these all need to be serviced. At any of these developments need to have the jobs housing balance applied to them first, because this is going to draw more jobs, this whole complex, and we need to do major rezoning in Boulder. Now, what I think is primarily really important is to do more MARPA house zoning, such that you would have like 8 people to 10 people in a 4,000 square foot place using one kitchen, but zone it so they have 2 refrigerators, and yet it's much more efficient use. There's 1 washer dryer for 4,000 square feet and with 10 people in that place, or 8 people, whatever you want, like 800 square foot per person or 500, but not these 300 square foot things that are very costly. It's the whole, a whole kitchen and a whole bathroom for 1 person. Then I can see that we can actually have some realistic, if it's possible at all, affordable housing here. And that's what we need here in this space is housing, right? Because housing's getting pushed out and out and out, but we don't have the services anymore. And these are not services that I use that I feel are important, but the whole board and a public hearing needs to determine what the services are that this community needs. I would grant you to say that they want a frigging drugstore in the neighborhood, that they want, the essential services for each, 15-minute neighborhood in Boulder, and not to have that withdrawn in the honor of super high expensive housing. Let's rezone and creatively and very comprehensively,
Right, Lynn, please
aerial view type
Lynn,
zone.
Please wrap up your thought.
Yeah, that's what I wanted. That was it. Just aerial view zoning with
Lynn.
jobs housing balance applied.
Thank you,
Thank
Lynn,
you,
very
Lynn.
much.
Anybody else? Just give people a couple seconds if there's anybody else that wants to raise their hand. Okay. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to go to our discussion. Staff has asked us to respond to one issue. Is the proposal consistent with the use review criteria set forth in 9-2-15E? Does anyone have something they want to talk about or raise questions about or share concerns with fellow board members on this topic? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. So we're going to go to, I think then we will just go to the motion. One thing I would like to start doing, at least for a time, is before we go to motion making on any project is to ask the attorney present, in this case, Laurel, to just remind us of how we make a motion, what the process is, and if someone wants to add propose a friendly, like just what the process is, just so we're reminded each time. So Laurel, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, sure, I can help with this. So in the memo that Allison drafted, there's some suggested motion language, which you're welcome to use, or you can change it. So any member of the board is allowed to make a motion. Once that motion is on the table, there's a couple of options. Somebody can second that motion, or there's an option for a friendly amendment. So this would be if you wanted to maybe change the language a little bit to something that you think that original motion maker would like, or would be a little bit easier to read, or something along those lines, you can ask to change that language in a friendly motion is what we call it. So once that has been approved, and once any sort of changes are made, which I can help walk through if somebody would like to do that, I'm happy to help walk through that on a case-by-case basis, of course. Then the chair goes through and reads the motion out loud. At that point, you can have discussion about it. And either create more amendments to the motion, which we may see maybe in the ADU in the next public hearing. But in this public hearing, if you wanted to make any sort of changes, we can do that. And I can walk you through that when that happens. Once the motion has been put on the floor, seconded, the chair has said it, there's been a discussion, then we can go to a vote.
Okay. Awesome.
Yes. Yeah, and just feel free to ask me questions.
Great. And just because it's never so easy to make sure we're doing it the right way, I'm going to ask before any of our motions and public hearing motions to be walked through the process until we all know it by heart.
Sounds good. Yep.
Thank you very much, Laurel. Does anyone want to make the motion? Laura?
Yes, I move to approve use review number LUR 2022-00055, incorporating the staff memorandum, including its attachments as findings of fact and subject to the recommended conditions of approval.
Okay, does anyone want to make a friendly amendment?
So, Sarah, I have a question.
Sure.
And this is also for Laurel as well. When someone has made a motion and is it, I am not familiar, my understanding is we follow Robert's Rules of Order. Mm-hmm. And that I am not familiar with the idea that prior to a second, that the motion is subject to this friendly amendment. I think friendly amendments are specifically defined. I was just looking for my Roberts book and suddenly I've lost it in the mess of my office. But I would like to understand correctly. My understanding was motion is made. If it's seconded, then the motion is debated and amendment and becomes the property of the organization. No, it's no longer property of the motion maker. So I would love to do this on an easy subject like this one.
Sure.
And so my question is this window of friendly opportunities something I'm just not familiar with and is actually part of Roberts, or is it something that's more of a tradition of this board?
It's something that's more of a tradition of this board, but it is really common among boards in nonprofit and government situations. I think Robert's Rules of Order may mention it, but the idea here is it's not a formal amendment once the motion is part of the board. It's more of a tweak or adjustment, and we call it a friendly amendment as in like it's not something to completely change the motion necessarily. It's more of a friendly amendment to change the language, the suggested language. And one of the things that Helen and I have been talking about, the other attorney that advises this board, is doing like a training on this as well. So this is more of a tradition of the board. This is something that they've done before, and it's just a way to slightly tweak the motion or slightly change things before it gets to a full motion of the board. Now, if you're talking about an amendment, say you're working on an ordinance and you want to include an amendment language in that motion, then that would be something you would do after the chair announces it. It's more of a larger amendment or maybe some sort of tweak to the motion itself. But a friendly amendment tends to be something a little bit smaller or maybe a little bit of a change. And the idea of a friendly amendment is that the motion maker can agree to it and then it turns into that's the actual motion, is this like friendly change to it.
So if Laura, having made the motion, it is first her option to reject or accept the friendly amendment. Is that correct? It is up to the motion maker. Not,
that is
not to the board, but
not to the board.
Motion maker.
Right, until the chair says the full motion and it's been first and seconded. So when that happens, then it turns into something a little bit different. But a friendly amendment is, yes, when the first person makes the motion, if somebody says, hey, I'd like to change this language a little bit, and Laura says, or I'm sorry, board member Kaplan says, yes, that's great, then it can move forward that way.
And then it would second, then it would seek a second.
Yeah.
But if board member Kaplan said,
please,
no,
please. We go by first names, right? Like I've never been board member Kaplan. I'm fine with being Laura.
Okay.
Yep.
If Laura said, no, I reject that language, then, and Kurt raised his hand and said, I second the motion, then the motion is the motion, and we debate, the motion maker would speak to the motion, then we would debate the motion. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes, and so say that person who offered the friendly amendment wants to make that change later, you could bring it back then and have it do more of a formal vote on that amendment after the motion. Yep.
Great.
So it gets a little bit, it can get a little bit convoluted. So that's why if something happens like that, I can help you walk through it.
Great, thank you.
Can I suggest we do have a session scheduled on the calendar that Devin so helpfully provides on April 25th under matters motion drafting session. So I'm okay with moving forward with this motion tonight, knowing that we have more time to talk about this and delve into the intricacies on April 25th, if that works for folks.
So before we move forward, Kurt has his hand up. So go ahead, Kurt.
I was just wondering if we needed to do the quasi-judicial thing, like disclosing ex parte context and stuff.
Yeah, yes. So if there is a matter that comes before you and you have ex parte contacts, you're welcome to email the attorneys in advance or the planning board in advance, or sorry, not the planning board. You're welcome to email the staff in advance. You can also bring it up during the meeting during quasi-judicial. So if there's something that you believe could be a conflict or something like that, we could talk about what that looks like under the City of Boulder's ordinances.
Kurt, would you like me to find out if anyone has a conflict?
Well, I just wanted to make sure we weren't skipping a step, but if that's, yeah.
No, it's a perfectly logical step to take. We have made, a motion has been made. So I guess the question, just for make sure we're doing this as cleanly as we can, given that a motion's already been made, would now be an okay time to do the ex parte question, or should we wait until a second and then do the ex parte question? I just want to make sure we're doing this in a way that's legit. Laurel, what do you think?
I would recommend doing it now before you move into the motion process.
Okay.
What I've seen other boards do is do it at the very beginning of a public hearing. We could set it up that way in the future, but for this one, I'd recommend before you vote, if anyone does have a concern that we talk.
Okay. All right. So Kurt, is your hand still up, or? All right. Let's. The motion is out there, but for the moment, we're going to put it on the side table. Does anyone have any ex parte relationship or partnership or anything with the applicant that we need to know about? Nope. Okay. We have a motion. Is there a friendly? Mark?
I'd like to second the motion.
Okay. But you have.
I'm sorry. I thought you had already asked for friendly, so I will withdraw my second. Let you ask your question.
Thank you.
We'll see.
Any friendlies? No. Okay. Do we have a second?
Yes.
Mark is seconding it. Okay. Why don't we take? We have to take a roll call. ML.
Before you take a roll call, make sure you repeat that.
Oh, thank you.
Repeat the motion.
So the motion
Apologies.
to approve use review number LUR 2022 00055, incorporating the staff memorandum, including all its attachments as findings of fact and subject to the recommended conditions of approval. ML?
Aye.
Laura?
Aye.
Kurt?
Aye.
Mark?
Yes.
Sarah? Aye. So it passes 5-0. Okay, we can move on to public item number 2. Folks, we're only an hour in. Do folks want to take a 5-minute break and then come back at 7:05 or 7:06, or you want to just keep plowing ahead?
I could keep going.
Okay, we'll keep going. Okay. All right, hold on one second. All right, we are going to public hearing number 2, a public hearing and recommendation of City Council regarding proposed ordinance 8571, amending section 4-20-18 rental license fee, Title 9 Land Use Code, and Title 10 Structures BRC 1981 to update the regulations for accessory dwelling units. And we have Lisa Hootie here to walk us through this. Take it away, Lisa.
All right, thank you, Chair. Good evening, Planning Board. Looking forward to giving you an overview of the accessory dwelling unit regulation update, Ordinance 8571. The purpose of your review tonight is to make a recommendation to the City Council on the ordinance that's before you and that you reviewed in your memo, in your packet. So starting off with the absolute basics, I know that we've talked about accessory dwelling units or ADUs several times, but for anyone who might be listening, just a quick overview on what accessory dwelling units mean in Boulder. So you can see the graphic on the side. In Boulder, we have 2 types of ADUs. We have attached ADUs, which could be like an attic apartment or a basement apartment. And then we also have detached ADUs, which means that it's in a separate structure. But what an ADU really is a small residence that's sharing a lot with a larger main house. And in Boulder, an ADU can only be located on a lot with a single family home. And also that lot has to be owner occupied. So the property owner has to live either in the main house or the accessory dwelling unit. But in most basic terms, an ADU is an independent and self-contained living space. So it has its own kitchen and bathroom. The scope of the ADU update project that we're going through tonight is dictated by the City Council. They set this as one of their work program priorities for 2022 to 2023, with the express objective to increase the allowance of ADUs in the community. There are kind of 4 main points that this ADU update project is focused on. The first being eliminating the ADU saturation limit. The second, modifying the size limits. Third, general clarification and simplification of the regulations. And then 4th, improving the approval processes. As noted in the memo in your packet, this project also helps to support several policies in our comprehensive plan related to the built environment, housing, and local governance. The public engagement that's been going on for this project over the last several months is listed on this slide. As part of this project, we also are relying a lot on the engagement that was done back in 2016 and 2018. There was a significant amount of public engagement done at that time, which is very relevant to these changes as well. And we're also using that to inform these changes. We've been meeting with several different groups and boards over the last several months, as well as with the City Council. We held a community conversation back in February, which I'll detail a bit more on a later slide. We had virtual public engagement on our Be Heard Boulder, our public engagement virtual site, which has been open for several months. We've also been hosting office hours for people to come to ask questions about the ordinance. We had one earlier this week, and then we'll have another one in a couple of weeks. And then overall, we'll have the typical public hearing process. So we went to the Housing Advisory Board a few weeks ago. We're here tonight. And then as is typical with ordinance, it then goes through to City Council, where there will be another public hearing. So all of this work for engagement is really focused on a consult level of engagement for this project. A quick summary of the input that we've heard so far in 2023. You all received any written public comments. Those were attached to your memo and in your packet. So you've seen many of those, as well as received several emails in the last few days, in addition to what was in your packet. But as a general overview, the public comments that we've heard in writing so far are kind of twofold. So there's some support. We're hearing support for changes from some, with a desire to even go further than what the ordinance proposes, as well as hearing concerns from others about ADUs. And these really focus a lot on rental housing issues, things like parking and density. I mentioned we had a community conversation. It was called Planning for Affordable Housing because it was focused on the many different housing related code changes that the city is undertaking right now. And it was a really great event in February. It was about 25 representatives of different neighborhood organizations, the university, and some other advocacy groups where we all came together and had a great conversation about the issues and opportunities related to the various code changes, including these ADU changes that you're looking at tonight. There, we also heard a diversity of opinions, both support for the proposal, desire to go further with the changes, as well as some concerns about ADUs not being used as rental housing and the affordability levels of ADUs. We also, in January, went to our community connectors and residents group, which indicated a support for eliminating the saturation limit, increasing the size limit, but also ensuring that ADUs are truly creating housing for the Boulder residents that need it, as well as some programmatic suggestions to ensure that the benefits of ADU ownership are more widespread. I mentioned that we went to Housing Advisory Board a few weeks ago with this ordinance, and the Housing Advisory Board voted unanimously to recommend approval of the ordinance on March 22nd. We also have been discussing the changes with City Council. We had a study session with them in January. At that study session, City Council indicated support for eliminating the saturation limits, increasing the size limits, and also undertaking several changes to clarify and improve the process of ADUs. I know we've gone through this as a matters item before, but just a brief overview of the evaluation that was completed. So you all are familiar with the last major update of the ADU regulations was adopted in 2018 and put into effect in 2019. And so for several months last year, we spent time evaluating and creating an evaluation of those changes that had taken place or had become effective in 2019 and how those impacted ADUs in Boulder. So you might remember this chart, which shows how many ADUs had been approved each year since ADUs were first made legal in Boulder in 1983. And you can see there was a significant increase in 2019 after the last major update to the ADU regulation. So the evaluation was really focused on those years 2019 to present to understand the barriers and changes, how they impacted ADUs. That evaluation focused on understanding the changes that had been made that really did seem to reduce barriers to ADUs and spur ADU construction in Boulder, as well as identifying potential improvements in addition to those changes that could further reduce barriers to ADUs. And that evaluation was very informative of the proposed ordinance before you tonight. We talked about this in the matters item as well. We also completed a survey of all of the owners of accessory dwelling units last year. It's something that we've done in previous years, so we have the ability to compare answers from 2022, 2017, and 2012. And about half of owners actually responded to that survey. We talked about this in matters that some of the highlights or interesting things that came out of that survey was understanding that a greater percentage of ADUs are being used as space for visitors and relatives. And then because the affordable ADU option was something that was adopted in 2018, we also asked some questions trying to understand the intent or the impetus for why people chose to do an affordable ADU. And that survey showed that 40% of owners chose to do an affordable ADU in order to reduce their parking requirement. We also completed, along with the evaluation, we completed research of comparable cities. So this was looking at 34 different cities around the country that are comparable to Boulder in some way, whether a lot of them were university towns, similar population size, similar population density, things like that. There's a much more detailed matrix in your packet, but just a quick overview of takeaways from these cities. None of the cities that we studied have a saturation limit for ADUs. So we did some further research. So none of those cities in the comparable city so that we looked at had that, but we did some further research to find other cities throughout the country that might use a similar saturation limit. And we were actually only able to find one small town in Connecticut that has a similar saturation limit for ADUs. So it's definitely something that is quite unique to Boulder. Of the 34 cities we looked at, only a few of them use a minimum lot size requirement for ADUs, although almost all of the cities we looked at do limit it to only one ADU per lot. Regarding size, Boulder's maximum size of detached ADUs appeared to be smaller than most cities, although if you look at Colorado tends to trend smaller, so about 600 to 1,000 square feet as a maximum. But generally, in looking at all of these comparable cities, around 800 square feet or a percentage of the principal structure is kind of the most typical. There's a variation on parking requirements among the cities. Almost all of the cities say the ADU can't be sold separately, so it really has to be an accessory unit to a main house. And then about half and half related to owner occupancy. So about half are like Boulder that require the owner to live on site. All right, so now I'm going to get into the focus areas of the actual ordinance. And I have split it into kind of those four main topics. And if you have clarifying questions, I'll have a spot after each topic where we can stop and ask, and I can answer any clarifying questions, or if there are none, we can get through to the next topic, but that's kind of how the rest of the presentation is organized. So like I mentioned, there's these four main topics: saturation limits, size limits, clarification, and approval processes. So we'll start with the saturation limit, which I know we discussed at the matters item in January as well, but for those who might not have been in attendance, the saturation limit that exists in Boulder only applies to the RL1 and RL2 zoning districts. Those are our low density residential districts. And it's a saturation limit of 20%. So essentially, this graphic shows it in kind of the simplest form possible. But if there were 10 properties within a 300-foot radius, only 2 of those properties, or 20%, could have an accessory dwelling unit. There's some nuance in the code too, where it also includes non-conforming properties like non-conforming duplexes, things like that. Those would count towards that 20%. But essentially, if there are 2 properties within your radius of 10 that already have an ADU, and you are the 3rd property that would like to develop an ADU, there is no option to develop an ADU because you've hit the saturation limit for that area. And so this is kind of unique for a zoning standard. It's something that often it changes over time, or there's no option or variance process or anything. If you've hit the saturation limit, there is no opportunity to develop an ADU. So the intent, I think the original intent behind the saturation limit, because it has been in place in the code since the original ADU regulations were adopted in 1983. At that time, accessory dwelling units were not common around the city. They had been made illegal through single-family zoning for probably decades in most of the country. So it was kind of a new concept. And understandably, there was probably concern about what the potential impacts would be of accessory dwelling units on single family neighborhoods. Fast forward 40 years, we now have nearly 500 ADUs in Boulder. Many cities throughout the country allow ADUs, like I mentioned, without saturation limits. And our code has evolved significantly over the last 40 years. So we have established robust zoning standards that are intended to address and mitigate any potential impacts. So we have a lot more tools in our toolbox now than we did in 1983. One of the issues that came up consistently in the evaluation that we did of the accessory dwelling units with the saturation limit is that it is very confusing for applicants and property owners to understand what the saturation limit is. So these are all verbatim quotes from property owners or residents who have written into our Inquire Boulder, which is our customer service portal, asking questions about the saturation limit. It's actually the most common question we get about ADUs is about the saturation limit. And I think the one in the top right kind of sums it up well, what people are asking. We'd really like to consider an ADU, but we need to confirm that our area is not saturated first. How do we do that without creating a whole full application, submitting the fee, things like that? So that's what's really unique about the saturation limit is that it changes over time. So you might ask the city in January, is my area saturated? We would say, you know, this, and staff has to do it. So property owner can't do it themselves. Staff has to create a special map to determine the saturation limit. We might say, yes, you're okay right now. But by the time you submit your application in the summer, your neighbor has already gotten their ADU approval and now you are no longer able to do an ADU. So that just it's a zoning standard that doesn't really work like any other zoning standard. So it's definitely quite unique. It also is, just something that's very confusing to the public, and something when we went through the evaluation, it just continues to pose both a real and perceived barrier to ADUs. I mentioned that our code has evolved significantly since 1983. This graphic summarizes all of the different zoning standards that would apply to the design and location of an accessory dwelling unit. This is kind of a typical 7,000 square foot lot in our RL1 zoning district. So we have things like maximum height, setbacks, side yard bulk planes, the maximum length of a wall, as well as floor area ratios, building coverages. All of these apply to the design of the ADU. And then in addition to that, we have all of these ADU standards. So we have parking requirements, we have minimum lot sizes, we have some design standards for both detached and attached. And we also require, like I mentioned, owner occupancy. So the owner has to live on site. And the occupancy limits are essentially almost identical to what the occupancy limit would be on a typical single family house. ADUs do have a little bit more flexibility on dependence, but that's the only difference between occupancy. So they're limited quite similarly by occupancy, so the number of unrelated people that can live on a site, as well as maximum size. And Sarah, I think I'm almost to the clarifying question. It's just the next slide. So this is all just to show that there are significant zoning standards that regulate and can help to mitigate the impact of ADUs. And this is what, when we looked at all of those comparable cities that don't use saturation limits, they rely on standards like these to mitigate the impacts of ADUs. So the proposed code change, this is where we can stop for questions, but the proposed change that's in the ordinance is to eliminate the saturation limit of 20%. So there would no longer be a saturation limit in the RL1 and RL2 zoning districts. And Sarah, I can take your question now.
Can you just go back to that previous slide? One of the questions I had was in the mix of proposed regulatory changes, do any of these regulations change?
No, so the only, so all of the blue and green, those all just apply to principal and accessory structures. The yellow is ADUs. Those would all stay the same with the exception of the maximum size, the actual maximum size changing. That's also proposed in the ordinance, but everything else stays the same.
So the maximum size, I think it was 800 for some and 1,000 for others, would still have to fit into these limitations.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have questions for Lisa at this point? ML?
Do I have to disclose at this point before I make any statements into this that do I have to make a disclosure about ADUs and my work?
Laurel, can you appear?
Or do I wait until?
Wait, let's ask Laurel. Laurel, can you appear by magic? ML has a question about her need to disclose her business working with building AD or designing ADUs.
Yeah, let's go ahead and disclose that. ML, go ahead.
Great. So disclosure, ADUs have been the subject of my professional research since 2016. They're also a component of my work as an architect, as I specialize in small houses. However, after consultation with the city attorney's office, neither of these pose a legally defined conflict of interest. So I believe I am capable of upholding my duties as a member of planning board with no conflict whatsoever on the subtopic of ADUs.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
So the question I have around the saturation. We've been getting a lot of input from the public concerned about Uni Hill and the saturation. So Lisa, my question as it refers to the Uni Hill area and ADUs is the Uni Hill area primarily rental or owner occupied? As and I don't know how one would know where the quote, problem or issue areas would be within Uni Hill. But one of the caveats of ADUs is that there has to be an owner occupancy. So I wonder how that plays into the concern. It would be on how the current rentals or properties that are of concern are occupied. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. Thanks, ML. Yeah, that's a great opportunity to clarify as we have gotten several public comments on that. So as I mentioned, an ADU can only be legally established where the owner occupies. So I'm not certain of the exact numbers, but I think the University Hill neighborhood does have a significant number of rental properties. So if the owner is not occupying the property, an ADU cannot be established. And we do check that at the application stage. They have to prove their owner occupancy. That's one of the main requirements for any ADU. Mm-hmm. They also have to record a declaration of use, swearing that they will continue to live there. And there are enforcement opportunities. If there are any issues with owner occupancy, we can enforce that through our enforcement program as well. But to answer your question, because University Hill, I think, has a significant number of rental properties, only the properties that are owner occupied would be eligible to have an ADU.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's beneficial. Thank you for that. Beneficial to the public to hear that information. So it may not be a real concern if the owners aren't living on the properties. It may not have removing the saturation as proposed may not have any significant impacts to that area given the owner occupancy requirement. Yeah, that was my question. Thank you so much for answering.
Thanks.
Does anyone else have a question at this point? Laura.
Thank you. Lisa, going back to the compatible development standards, I think I understood from previous conversations that let's say somebody has a small house and they want to build an ADU. That ADU, to put it in layman's terms, would have to fit in the same footprint of they could just expand their house, right? And the number of people that could live on that property, I think you mentioned the occupancy, is basically the same, whether it's 3 unrelated people living just in the house, or it's 2 unrelated people in the house and 1 unrelated person in the ADU. Like the occupancy, you don't get a whole new 3 unrelated people living in your ADU, right? It's the same amount of occupancy and it's the same building square footage that you could get if you just expanded your house. Is that correct?
Exactly. So if say a lot was allowed 3,000 square feet total, they can either put that into all one large house, or the ADU would be subject to that same 3,000. If the ADU is 500 square feet, the house can be 2,500 square feet. So however you want to accommodate that size, there's no additional size allowed for the ADU. And then in regards to occupancy, like I mentioned, there's a bit of flexibility for ADUs in that more dependents can stay on the site, but in terms of unrelated adults and dependents, typically we use the IRS tax code, so it gets very complicated, but typically it's children, but it can also be dependent adults, but often that's just having more children on the site.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this point? All right, Lisa, plow ahead.
All right. All right, so the next topic is the size limits for ADUs. So going back to this graphic and seeing these attached versus detached, the size limits actually differ based on attached and detached. So an attached ADU currently is allowed to be 1/3 of the size of the main house, or 1,000 square feet. So how this works is if you had a 1,500 square foot house, you would be limited to a 500 square foot ADU. So you aren't really able to take advantage of that full 1,000 square feet unless the house is 3,000 square feet or larger. For a detached ADU, the maximum size currently is 550 square feet. And then, as we discussed previously, an affordable ADU, so the option to designate your ADU as affordable, which means it's affordable to no greater than 75% of the area median income. They are permitted to have an increased size limit, so they can go a little bit bigger with ADUs as if you designate it as an affordable unit. I did want to, this was in your packet, there were some photos of ADUs that have been approved in the last 3 years, but I did just want to kind of give some, rather than just the graphic, just show you some real pictures of sizes of ADUs. Because we have been allowing those affordable ADUs to be a bit bigger than the typical 550 square feet or 1/3 or 1,000, I just wanted to show some examples of some of the larger ones that were designated as affordable ADUs. So you can see the one on the top is about a 700 square foot ADU. The picture on the left shows what you see from the street, and then the actual ADU from the alley. On the bottom is an 800 square foot ADU. Have some more, another one that's 800 square feet. This was a conversion of an existing structure. And then just comparison, the one on the bottom is a 516 square foot. So that's a market rate ADU. Some different contexts. So some areas without alleys, just over 800 square feet for the one on the left and just under 700 for the one on the right. And then some photos of attached ADUs. So these were taking that 1/3 or 1,000 square feet. So you can see the one on the right is an 812 square foot ADU in the basement of that home. And then the one on the left is a 1,200 square foot ADU. This was actually one that had to go through the Board of Zoning Adjustment to get a variance for the maximum floor area, which was approved. And that was to take advantage of the full size of that. And Mark, I saw your hand.
Yes, I had your presentation prompted a question that I hadn't thought about in a while. I used to live on Marine Street as a student, and my good friend across the street they had a house and they had an ADU in the back. And at the time, it was considered an attached ADU because they had run a covered, a walkway cover from the main house to the ADU, and they said this is attached. That the structure, because there was a physical attachment, tenuous as it might be. Does our code currently prohibit that sort of definition of attached?
I would have to dig into the code to see the exact, because I know we have specific standards related to covered walkways and things like that. But the attached unit really does have to be attached to the structure, however we use that definition. So if it qualified as that, we would call it attached. But in that evaluation, we did see that about 2/3 of the ADUs over the last couple of years have actually been detached ADUs. So it's more common to see the detached.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so the proposed, I was just one slide away that time too. All right, so the proposed change related to size limits. We talked for a bit in the matters item about how there's a unique ADU floor area measurement definition that ADUs have a special way of measuring floor area that basically confuses everyone that has to deal with it. And so the proposal in the ordinance is to just use the floor area definition that we use for every other building, so that it would strike the unique ADU floor area measurement, and then just use what we use for everything else. And then the proposal in the ordinance is to modify the size limits as shown in this table. So the attached units I mentioned are currently limited to 1/3 of the size of the principal unit, or 1,000 square feet. The proposal is to increase that to 1/2 of the principal unit, or 1,000 square feet. So that's what's been currently allowed for affordable units. So you saw a couple examples of those. And then for detached, it would be increasing from 550 square feet to 800 square feet. Again, that's the current limit for affordable detached ADUs. And then in order to preserve the incentive for affordable ADUs, we've correspondingly increased the allowed size for the affordable units and also historic units, which have a similar incentive. So an affordable attached would be increased to 2/3 of the principal size of the structure, or 1,200 square feet. And then the affordable detached would be able to go up to 1,000 square feet. And then the same rules for the historic. And those are the proposals related to size limits. I can take any questions now. I see Laura.
Yeah, Laura.
On that first line there for attached, you have 2 different measurements and you say whichever is less. Does that also apply to the affordable attached and the historic attached, that it's one of these 2 measurements, whichever is less? Or is it just either of these?
It's whichever is less.
Whichever is less. So that's kind of unsaid, but for all of the dark gray, it should say whichever is less.
Oh, yep. Thank you.
Okay.
Good attention to detail. Thanks.
Just curious, because 2/3 of the principal unit could be quite large. So
yeah, sorry. That is in the ordinance. It's whichever is less.
Whichever is less. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Kurt?
Regarding the change in how floor area is measured, my understanding is for a standard 2x6 wall, it won't change the effective number. Is that correct? It only changes it for thicker walls?
Yeah, so the intent of the unique floor area measurement was essentially for hay bale construction, like really thick walls. And so it was to 6 inches within the wall. So yeah, it would just be to the exterior framing now, which is how we measure every other structure for floor area.
So if you're building a standard 2x6 structure, the current way of measuring and then the current weird way of measuring and then the new standard way of measuring will give the same number.
I believe so. I gotta think through the math, but yes. This is why the unique ADU floor area is confusing.
Carl is there as well. I think he might have an answer.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Go ahead, Carl.
A smiling face.
Yeah. I mean, it would go to exterior framing, or if you have like a material on the outside, like brick, it goes to the exterior of that material. So just for that area that is the ADU, you would use that on the whatever the exterior is. So it would just be making the measurement of the ADU the same as how we have it defined in our definitions section already.
So it's slightly more restrictive depending on how thick your exterior material is.
Yes, it would be more restrictive if you were building a hay bale construction or like extra thick walls. The proposed ordinance would be more restrictive for that type. Over the last 3 years, we haven't seen any proposals that have done that. And so the idea is more that, we have a variance process. And so kind of the exception to the rule could go through a variance and get that, rather than confusing every application that comes through by having this unique floor area measurement.
And also taking into account that, we're proposing increased sizes for the ADUs that can account for some of that. Obviously, the differential isn't going to be, it'll be a fraction of that increase.
Charles, did you want to add something?
No, just agreeing.
Okay. Any other questions at this point? All right, Lisa, carry on.
All right. Now we will jump into, these are the code clarification items. So these are items that came up frequently throughout the evaluation as items that we could tackle that would also help to reduce barriers to ADUs by clarifying issues that are just frequently coming up through the application process. So 2 of these were related to process. So The first issue is extending the approval expiration period. So right now, ADUs are approved as a conditional use, which has a 1-year expiration period. With today's construction timelines and permitting timelines and things like that, we're seeing people get pretty close to that 1 year, and it's stressful for applicants and concerning. And so that was one of the issues that was raised frequently throughout the evaluation, was that approval expiration period of only 1 year. Another issue that was brought up was our public notice requirement related to the accessory dwelling unit. So there's a public notice. It goes to your adjacent neighbors, but the neighbors can't actually impact or influence the application at all. So it's understandably a confusing and frustrating process of public notice, that they receive this notice, but they can't comment on it. They can't make any changes. It's kind of just a notice for a notice. So the proposal in the ordinance is actually to change an accessory dwelling unit from a C, or a conditional use in the use table, to an A, or allowed use. And then the brackets in the table, if you'll remember from the use table project, that means that there are standards that apply to that. So it would be an allowed use subject to specific use standards, rather than having that separate conditional use process. It's something that came up over and over and over again from internal stakeholders, applicants, people that had withdrawn applications, ADU owners, was that the 2-step process for an accessory dwelling unit is extremely confusing and frustrating, inefficient, really just creates a lot of issues. So by changing it from a conditional use to an allowed use, it can be a 1-step process. And I'll explain that a little bit more in later slides as well. But the changes in the ordinance would change it from conditional to allowed. In that way, there's no longer the separate expiration period for the conditional use. So the properties are just subject to the typical building permit expiration timelines that anyone applying for a building permit has to be subject to. And then one other consequence of this is that allowed uses do not require public notice. So there would no longer be a public notice requirement attached to the accessory dwelling unit. One of the other code clarification items within the ordinance is related to the height of existing structures. As it stands now, there is some flexibility for adaptively reusing existing structures. Typically, an accessory structure has to be 20 feet, and that's the maximum height. But if you're reusing an existing structure right now, the code says you can be up to 25 feet in height. We've had several applications in the last year or so that have actually exceeded 25 feet in height, and there's no variance or modification or any option that they have in our code to adaptively reuse that structure into an ADU. So the proposed ordinance eliminates that maximum of 25 feet and says that as long as you're not changing the size or height or roof form of an existing structure, you can convert that into an ADU. And that's for a number of reasons. Promoting the adaptive reuse of existing structures, environmental sustainability of using existing building materials, things like that. And just providing the flexibility for those structures that are already there and likely would have less of an impact on your neighbors if the structure's been there for a long time, things like that. Other updates to the detached ADU height standards. There's a confusing standard that's been in there for decades related to a roof wall ratio. That's been removed, but we did retain some flexibility for ADUs with kind of steeply pitched roofs to exceed that 20-foot height, so as to not overly incentivize flat roof structures. Lockable separation, this gets really into the weeds of interpreting code, but it's something that came up really quite frequently through the evaluation. It's something that we use as the designator between two different dwelling units if there's lockable separation, but it was kind of deeply within the definitions in the land use code. So we put it front and center in the attached ADU standards that they have to be separated with a lock, physically separated, in order for it to be an ADU. Limited accessory units, I mentioned that we have 2 types of ADUs. We actually have 3 types. We have this limited accessory unit. There's only 1 of them in the city. It was kind of a different way to have a non-conforming duplex, but only 1 property has ever taken advantage of it. The incentive for it is pretty low, and it just adds additional code language to the code. So we've removed that from the code. And then finally, related to owner occupancy, I think we discussed this at the matters item. We added more clarity to the definition of owner occupancy to clarify what if a property is owned by a limited liability company or similar structure, how they can prove owner occupancy. And then we've added some specific language into the standard about owner occupancy, about what kind of documents people need to supply in order to prove that owner occupancy, and also that the city can request that at any time, request those kind of documents to ensure owner occupancy. So those are the code clarification items that came through or were kind of brought to the surface through that evaluation that we've included in this ordinance. And I can answer any questions on any of those.
Does okay, ML, anyone else put up their hand if they have questions? And I also have a question. ML, go ahead.
Thank you. So Lisa, regarding the separation, lockable separation requirement, what about the situation where they add, it's an addition to the property and there doesn't exist an attachment, an access from the main house into the ADU. It doesn't so they're not renovating something within it. Do they have to create that? I mean, and why?
No, that's a good clarification. So if it's just an addition that's totally separately accessed, then that we would consider that physically separated. This is more to clarify the typical case of like a basement being converted into an ADU. It's just one of the main defining features of a separate dwelling unit is having a physical lockable separation. So yeah, if you have no doorway into lock, that's still physically separated.
Right. Okay. Okay, that makes. I don't remember it being abundantly clear in the language.
That's why we're trying to clarify it.
I know. I'm going to go look. I mean, in the one I just read, I didn't see that it specifically said if it is an addition. It's attached, but it's an addition. So there never was commonly accessible situation that you don't need to create one.
Yeah, we can look at that. Make sure that that's clear.
Okay, that would be great. Thanks.
Bert?
Yeah, I had that same question because talking about requiring it to be lockable kind of implies that it can be unlockable, which it sounds like is not required.
Right.
Yeah. So I was confused about the permit approval timeline change, because it talks about in the memo you talk about changing it from 1 year, but then you talk about 180 days. So can you maybe just give a little more detail on that?
Yeah. So I think when we originally brought, and you wouldn't have been on the board, but when we originally brought this as one of the issues we were going to tackle with the ordinance, the idea was to maybe give the ADU a 3-year process or a 3-year expiration period, like our land use reviews. So like the use reviews that you looked at before. But as we thought through the procedural changes and in changing it from a 2-step review to a 1-step review, if it's not a separate application, then it would just have to comply with the building permit application. And those ADUs, like even now that have a 1 year, it's a 1 year to establish that building permit. So then they're subject to the building permit expiration period anyway. So it's not giving extra time in the building permit. And that is a process that people can get through in that time, and they can request extensions and things like that. So we felt like the change from the 2-step review to the 1-step review was adequate in order to address that problem. So because it was really an issue of the 2-step review. That
okay, so so in effect, yeah, the bottom line is basically it's going from you have 1 year to build to 3 years to build. That's the important part of the change. Is that right?
Well, it's that you don't have to get a separate approval first that might expire. You just are ready to go with your building permit and you submit for the building permit and the ADU would be approved at the same time. So there's not a separate process beforehand that would expire.
Okay, okay. Okay, gotcha. And so I know that there were questions about simultaneous permitting. So you've got an empty lot and you want to build a house and an ADU. And there were questions about whether those could be permitted simultaneously, which is currently not allowed. Does this allow that?
Yes, we've tried to be more clear in the ordinance, and those were all based on interpretations, or that was an interpretation of the ordinance. And so we've tried to be clear with the language that was unclear before about how that would work so that you would be able to permit those simultaneously through the building permit.
Okay, sounds good. And then one question about LLC ownership. Say you have a family of 3, you know, 2 parents and a kid, and they they live in a house that is owned by an LLC, and each one has 1/3 ownership of the LLC. Because no one of them would surpass the 50% threshold, they would not be able to build an ADU. Is that correct under the new rules?
No, because all 3 of them would be living there, right? In this situation?
Right.
So that would be full, they would meet at least 50% are living on site.
Okay. So
it doesn't have to be that one specific owner owns more than 50. It's that the owners that are occupying the property have at least 50% ownership of that LLC.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. I think that's all my questions on this section.
Thanks.
So before I ask mine, Mark or Laura, do you have questions? Laura has a question. Go ahead and I'll follow Laura.
Yeah, just one. Lisa, I might have blanked out and missed it, but did you mention the temporary rental exemptions when you were going through the changes?
No, I didn't. Thank you for that opportunity to clarify. So we did add some more language in the section about owner occupancy, about the temporary rental exemptions based on the direction that we got from you and first from City Council in the matters item and study session. So we've clarified that people can't, like the example was sabbatical. We've clarified that people are able to go on sabbatical, leave their home for less than a year outside of Boulder County, and they could rent out their house while they're gone and also rent out the ADU. But that is limited to a 1-year period, and it's subject to our typical temporary rental exemption process.
And that's the same as if like a homeowner currently who wants to rent out their house where they go on sabbatical doesn't have to obtain a rental license for that sabbatical period. So it's very similar to kind of what's in place now for homeownership exemptions for a short period of time.
Exactly. It uses the same process. The clarifying language in the ordinance is that's the only exception for owner occupancy is if you've got this temporary rental exemption situation.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm going to follow up on several questions that were raised and ask one additional. So follow up on the temporary rental. It's limited to a 1-year period, but could someone who leaves for 6 months a year do it every single year?
No, I should check the exact language, but I know there's a limit of how often you can do it. I think you can only do it once in Carl, do you know, is it like a 2 or 3 year period? There is a limit.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what the timeline is, but yeah, it limits how many times you can do it.
Yeah, sorry, that goes into the licensing code, which is outside my area of expertise.
Okay. Okay, then I'm also, this LLC question confuses me a bit, and it sort of touches back on the issue ML brought up from the concerns we've heard from Uni Hill residents. So the issue with, as I understand it from the Uni Hill stuff, letters that we've gotten is not just that it has to be an owner occupied home, but also that there are all of these non-conforming residential buildings. You know, they used to be single family homes and now they're triplexes or duplexes or apartments or whatever. And so that sense of a family neighborhood that's been already pretty densified, being further densified. So the question, I guess the question I have about the owner occupancy is, what are the risks of this LLC element? I realize that LLCs can be a framework for tax issues, and doesn't mean the homeowner doesn't live there. But I'm just trying to understand what was the thinking that went into this particular formulation, and enforcement is, like everything else in Boulder, going to be dependent on a neighbor calling into the enforcement office and asking it to be enforced. Like, what's the enforcement of this?
Sure. So I think that I think there were like 3 parts to that question.
Yeah,
so
sorry about that.
Hopefully I'll get to all of them. So let's see. So starting with the first. So I think that the issues of potential, so we have the regulation that requires owner occupancy. As we looked into it more, I think there's the same potential for owner occupancy not being complied with, whether it's a person's name on the title or an LLC. So there are, like you said, there are tax reasons why people own their property in an LLC, and that's what we discussed during the matters item and study session. That we do, and we allow people, like if the house is in a trust or something, they can also do that. So that's why we wanted to add the clarifying language, because there wasn't previously language that specifically addressed LLC situations. So now we have language that says that you have to submit, your membership, which is the practice we've been using, but they have to submit their membership agreements and kinds of things that they're proving their owner occupancy in the same way that someone with their name on the title is proving their owner occupancy, or someone with a trust. And so it's really just treating LLCs the same as the other properties. And let's see, the other parts of the question were enforcement. Okay. Yeah, so we looked into the enforcement. There are not a ton of cases related to owner occupancy. It's certainly something that comes up occasionally, and our enforcement officers do a great job of looking into that and making sure, it might be an issue of over time the owners have changed and they need to update, or they have their records are wrong and the assessor or something like that they just need to clarify. But again, in talking with our enforcement officers, it wasn't that there is a more significant issue with LLC owned properties related to that. It's just something that they can enforce. And that was part of the reason why we added more clarification about, you'll see in the ordinance, it says that the city can request at any time these documents, because right now it happens at the application stage. And so we just have a little bit more enforceability in the code language now about when we can request those documents again, if there's ever an issue.
So the third question that was embedded in these other questions had to do with the Hill and with the legal non-compliant buildings. And I'm just sort of curious, one of the things that we had talked about during matters, and I realized it was just matters, was the idea of an overlay zone for the Hill that would maintain the current saturation limit. And I'm curious what happened to that discussion.
Yeah, it was definitely something that we've been focusing on in recent months. I mentioned we had the community conversation with several neighborhood organizations, including the Hill. Carl and I went on a walking tour of the Hill. We've been in, and we've been receiving many public comments. So we've looked into it, and it kind of relies on, or the decision that we've made in the proposed ordinance relies on several different factors related to the University Hill and other university adjacent neighborhoods. The first is that we saw in our research that other cities that have saturation limits, or that do not have saturation limits, are able to adequately mitigate the potential impacts or issues of ADUs through the zoning standards. And I would argue that Boulder has probably more robust zoning standards than many cities anyway. So we have, like I showed on those, that diagram, we have many other ways to mitigate potential impacts. We also looked at the differences of the properties that are in districts that don't have saturation limits. So about 25% of ADUs are in districts that don't have saturation limits. And we looked at whether there was significant enforcement differences between those areas without a saturation limit and with, and we really just didn't see a difference or a significant difference. Our enforcement officers didn't point out any significant difference between the areas with the saturation limit and the areas without.
Enforcement of what?
Potential issues that have been raised through the concern. So things like parking or noise or trash or things like that. Really,
so I'm sorry, just so you were like comparing the Hill with Newlands or something.
Like with RMX1, we don't have a saturation limit or things like that. So just looking at those, that's a way to look at the differences. Okay. Is we have some areas that have saturation limits, we have some that don't, and we don't see a significant difference in the types of impacts to the surrounding community. And then also just talking with our enforcement folks and enforcement officers, they don't think, or they didn't note any difference between properties that have an ADU, like having more enforcement issues than any typical residential property. And we did look at the enforcement data. It's challenging because you can't get like a statistically valid number because there's only 450 properties with ADUs and tens of thousands of properties in Boulder. But just kind of looking at that, there's the typical residential issues that you see on any residential property, like snow shoveling and things like that. But really, we just didn't see a significant difference in the areas that have a saturation limit and don't. And so therefore we didn't propose, or we don't recommend creating a saturation limit for specific areas of the city.
Okay, thank you for that. And my last question actually has nothing to do with owner occupancy, but the public notice requirement. I'm just curious, if somebody's like blown out the back of their house and doing an addition, do they have to let their neighbors know? Okay.
No.
So this is just applying the same regulations about I'm doing on my land what I want to do. And if I'm a nice neighbor, I'll let you know it's going to be dusty and noisy for a while.
Exactly. There's no public notice requirement for those other types of construction.
All right. Those were my questions. So was there another section?
There is. It's just process improvements though. So it's only one slide. So these are actually not in the ordinance, but these are also part of the project. So I did want to highlight them. So we've talked already about the one-step review, but this is a pretty significant difference to our procedural, the procedures for ADUs. And that's facilitated by the other changes in the ordinance, like eliminating the saturation limit and changing it from a conditional use to an allowed use. That's what allows us to change it from a two-step review to a one-step review. And will significantly increase the efficiency of ADU review and approval. There's some other issues we've talked about in the matters item related to like when you get the address for the ADU. And we'll also be looking at the declaration of use, which is a document that people have to sign when they get an ADU approved to make sure that that language is working adequately. And then we're also going to focus a lot on self-service handouts, creating things for the customers to improve the experience of trying to get an ADU approved in Boulder. And those are all facilitated by the ordinance changes as well.
Does anyone have questions? Nope, go ahead, please.
All right, only a couple more. So,
wait, go ahead. Kurt just raised his hand.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was slow on the draw. Are there any other uses that require a declaration of use?
Yeah, so we actually do declaration of use for many different types of uses. Carl, do you want to help me with that one?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There are circumstances when we look at building permits, for instance, that might show a building that has 2 units and the zone only allows 2 units, but they might have a space in the unit that could have lockable separation and potentially a bathroom and kitchen that are separated where it could be used as a separate unit. So oftentimes we'll look at that and we'll make them revise the plan so that it's not something that qualifies as a kitchen, and then we'll actually require a declaration of use where they basically will say that we're not going to use that space as a separate unit because that would be a violation of the code. So that's one example where it comes up, particularly in building permit. Let me think where it comes up.
There's actually a
otherwise.
section of our code in 915.6 that talks about the city manager having authority, frankly, to require any use if there's question or if there's a benefit to a declaration of use. So it's pretty broad authority in our code.
Thanks, Charles.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Lisa, carry on.
All right. So just a couple final slides. So the next steps are to continue public engagement, hearing from the public throughout this process. It's currently tentatively scheduled that this ordinance would go to City Council April 20th for first reading, and then would have a public hearing at second reading on May 4th. And then the plan as proposed in the ordinance, there's an effective date of September 1st. So that would give several months to work on the process improvement changes, preparing for the ordinance changes, preparing those handouts, things like that, and also updating our electronic permitting system. So that would be the process. And I have a suggested motion, but I will just stop and see if there's any other questions.
Doesn't look like it. And we actually need to do public comment before we get to the motion.
Yeah.
So what would be helpful? Does anyone have questions before we go to public comment? Okay. And Lisa will not leave us, so we can always ask her questions when we're having our conversation. So what would be helpful right now is if everyone who wants to speak would, during public comment, would raise their hand so we can see how many folks there are. And Vivian, if you will let us know what you're seeing.
So far, I see 5 hands.
Okay, so my suggestion is that we have the public comment period and then we take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back for our discussion. Is that all right with everyone? All righty.
And 3
Vivian,
minutes. Yeah, Sarah?
3 minutes each, 3 minutes each. And Vivian, if you will lead us forward, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll just go down the line. So first we have Elizabeth Hondorf, followed by Tilla Duhaime. Please go ahead, Elizabeth. You have 3 minutes. And you may have to unmute yourself.
And then can you
should
turn
have
the clock again also?
Elizabeth, we can't hear you.
There, I got it.
There we go.
Hello? Hi.
Yeah.
I was on BOZA for 4 years, and I have an ADU, and I was BOZA chair, and I've been through some of this compatible development stuff, so I kind of have a grip on what you're talking about. I'm elderly now, and I'm a widow, and this saturation point thing has turned into a real vicious circle. I mean, there's no units left in my neighborhood, and so people are targeting me because because I was the last person in to get my ADU, and there's builders up here on 4th Street that want ADUs and they're huge houses, which actually they don't even use, a lot of them. And so creating a small amount when there's a big demand puts pressure on the people that have them and opens the door for harassment for elderly people. I've even been harassed about the religious background of people I rent to. So I'm all for the 100% saturation limit. And I think legally you're out of bounds not to allow it when it's that way in 99.9% of our country. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Next up, we have Tilla Duhaime, followed by Rob Ross. Please go ahead, Tilla.
Hi there, thank you. Tilla Duhaime, I'm at 2201 4th Street. Congratulations, Sarah, on your chairpersonship. And it's really nice to see you, Kurt. Welcome, I'm really glad to see you on planning board. I'm chiming in tonight just to support these ordinance changes. I was attending the office hours earlier this week with Lisa and was really, really impressed with staff's competency and just the effort that they have put forth. And I think you've seen it tonight that they're really, really trying to extend ADU availability and to rationalize what is unfortunately sort of left over from ordinances in 1983. So these are more small steps in the right direction. I am aware, only thanks to Lisa, that there are movements at the state legislature which might render kind of null the efforts that staff have done tonight, because they are considering even more liberal and permissive changes on ADUs. And I think that says a whole lot about Boulder's lack of vision and how it's hobbled by policies of 1983, that the state of Colorado is considering moving forward with something more progressive on allowing infill development, which is something we've been looking for changes to and progressive change on for decades now. I wanted to say, just as a personal level, my home is almost good enough for an attached ADU. We built our home about a little less than 10 years ago, and sort of had an included sort of granny flat unit because we have 4 aging parents that we were planning for. But it doesn't right now qualify under the current rules. And I think it would be pretty close under the modified rules. I'd have to figure out some of the parking stuff. But in the meantime, it is a very lucrative short-term rental now. So I would be interested in using that space as an ADU. We have had like a mother and a daughter, a friend of mine, stay down there for 6 months, and some other friends. So we've had some longer term sort of families living down there, but I can't add in the second kitchen. And it doesn't just qualify under the new criteria. But in the meantime, I'm using this perfectly lovely space for tourists. And I would like the planning board to consider that I can use this space as a short-term rental space. It's fully licensed and it meets all the criteria, but it doesn't meet the criteria for ADU. I'm also glad to see the outreach to the boards. Definitely the Housing Advisory Board is a great place to be consulting, as well as the planning board. But as a member of TAB, I suspect that TAB would also have some pretty impactful input about the parking requirements for the ADUs right now. So I know that's not part of the current set of regulations that you're considering, but as steps in the correct direction, I would encourage you to at least recommend these to council now, and we will keep moving to make ADUs even more affordable and accessible for everyone in Boulder.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. Okay, that's your 3 minutes. Next up, we have Rob Ross. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Rob Ross. I'm an architect and contractor here in Boulder, and generally I think the staff recommendations for the ADU reviews are all improvements, but I would like to suggest expanding the maximum height to not only include existing buildings, but also to include new structures. We live in a hilly town, and physical constraints like steep lots can virtually eliminate the ability to build a 20-foot tall structure when the height is dictated by a low point 25 feet away. So even a moderately steep site greatly limits what can be built, if anything at all. So if we're going to consider a height variance for existing buildings, even if they're not being modified, why not have them include other known constraints for new structures as well? So that's all I really have to add. So thanks for taking that into consideration.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have Lisa Spalding. Please go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you. Lisa Spalding, University Hill. I sent you an email with a little tiny PowerPoint. If you have it and you can pull it up, it would be great. The neighborhoods surrounding the university offer investors who pay cash for homes lucrative rental opportunities. This threatens the balance between families and students, which has always been crucial to the safety and stability of these neighborhoods. University Hill is particularly vulnerable because it was downzoned to RL1 in the 1970s to maintain a balance between families and student rentals. However, a large number of properties were grandfathered in as legal nonconforming duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. This has resulted in a low-density neighborhood based on dwelling units per acre, with a very high population density based on homes that have been carved up into apartments and historic Greek houses. The current saturation limit for ADUs consists of the number of existing ADUs, non-conforming properties, and co-ops. If 20% of any combination of these three types of residential uses exists within 300 feet of a property applying for an ADU permit, the property is placed on a wait list. I sent you the PowerPoint presentation that I believe illustrates this complex issue in the simplest terms possible. I used screenshots of 2 University Hill blocks and the city's rental housing map. And these are blocks that I personally know very well. The properties in green and blue have regular rental licenses, and properties with a red line around them are short-term rentals. I have put the number of legal occupants on each property that is a non-conforming use, whether it's licensed or not. The 800 block of 13th Street has 6 legal non-conforming properties that have a collective occupancy of 58. If the saturation limit is lifted, the remaining 12 houses on this block would be eligible for ADUs. This could add another 24 people to this block. The 800 block of 11th Street has 2 non-conforming properties with another large non-conforming use, the old Marpa House, around the corner. The cumulative occupancy for these 3 non-conforming properties is 166. The 9 owner-occupied properties on 11th that would be eligible for ADUs if the saturation limit is lifted could add another 18 people. These blocks are already at or beyond their carrying capacity without extra ADUs. I believe this problem could be easily addressed by maintaining the saturation limit on neighborhoods surrounding the university that have a large number of non-conforming uses, resulting in an already high population density. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Any other hands? I don't see any, but want to give folks, Lynn, please go ahead, Lynn Siegel.
Yeah, I agree with you, Lisa, that you need to do something separate with University Hill. Now, as far as this whole situation goes, I think this ADU expansion is an opportunity to leverage what else is happening in Boulder. Okay, if you're talking about parking reductions on 2206 Pearl, for example, that's not really stopping parking congestion. I mean, traffic congestion. And that's affected by everyone in town when they're trying to get around. In the neighborhoods, it's a different situation in the established single family neighborhoods. Because they're going to be individually affected with extra parking demand. But I think you have to use this against the developers you're doing the exact opposite, extreme densification in the very dense downtown part of Boulder and saying, oh, we're lifting parking restrictions because these people don't have cars. And they're going to be using cars a lot to truck their stuff around because they're living in 300 square feet spaces. Now, the ADUs are set up to have liberal space, 500 to 800 square feet. So that's a different situation. People are going to tend to stay at home more. The intensity of use is very different in the 2 spaces. And since there's such a passion for increasing density in Boulder, there really has to be a thoughtfulness about where and how you're increasing that density. And it's significant to me that on the one hand, you're saying, yes, people can have an ADU on this space in the single family neighborhood, and yet we can just jam it on 2206 Pearl and 1741 Walnut, where Skoke wants to put in these 300 and 350 square feet places. So think about how that works, because there, I was out on the street the other day and someone's waiting for a Uber and this car's driving down the street and they're saying, stop, you were supposed to pick us up. No, that Uber has to go to their destination and take that person. They can't take them part of the way. They have to separate each person out. So they're going around and around the block, congesting Boulder and this is big, and Tila should listen to this too, because it's an issue. And this is a grand opportunity now for you to leverage this against this intensive developing for this missing middle of these 300 square foot places. Because of this. And meantime, I think the
Lynn, appreciate if you can wrap it up.
I just want to finish my sentence. Meantime, I think you, much as I would like you to just expand, take away the regulations for ADUs, period, I would recommend that you increase the bandwidth from 300 feet to, twice that or something. And you can adjust this as you think about this other intense development going in town, that you want to balance it and kind of trade off the uses that are affecting.
Thank you, Lynn, thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn, and thank you everybody from the public who's come here tonight to share your feedback. We do appreciate it.
Anyone else, Vivian?
Nope, no other hands.
All right, so let's take a 10-minute break. We'll be back at 8:26, and we'll have our deliberations and then act on the motion. you having fun yet?
Kurt, you have behaved yourself so much better than Mark and ML and I did in our first meeting.
Well, apparently I'm doing something wrong.
Definitely. Please be more disruptive.
Be careful what you ask for.
Well, I think somebody at the beginning of this meeting said something about we shouldn't all be singing in harmony all the time. So
yeah, exactly. Hey, Sarah, I do have two more questions that I'm sorry I didn't ask earlier.
That's okay. Well, when everyone comes back and we start up again, Lisa is still here, and she'll be here till the bitter end, I believe.
She better be.
Okay. So is everyone back who needs to be back? David Gare is here. Hi, David. And Laurel is here. Great.
David is here. He's helping with the ADU ordinance. So he's helping our office temporarily. So he'll be popping on and on, off and on with questions. Yeah, he's back.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so we're back in session. It is 8:26. Kurt said he had some more questions for you, Lisa. And then we'll begin our deliberations.
I have one as well.
Okay, and Laura. And anyone else, raise your hand if you have other questions.
I had, two quick questions. There, first of all, in one of the public input, the letters that we got, there was a question about the compatibility language, which I know used to be in the ordinance, but then I wasn't seeing it anymore. Compatibility of design with the main house or surrounding area or something. Is that gone?
Yeah, that was removed. I think it was either in the 2018 major update or one that came shortly after. So it was eliminated from the ordinance in at least 2018 to 2020, sometime in that period.
Okay, sounds good. I just wanted to verify that. And then there's this provision 9632B about side entrances and screening side entrances of ADUs to make basically so that they're not visible from the main street. Did you consider removing that in the streamlining?
It was something that we looked at. It wasn't something that came up as an issue throughout the evaluation. So we were really focused on the things that popped up as major barriers. So that was a reason why we decided to keep it in there.
Okay. Okay. Oh, and I guess I'll phrase this as a question too. So one of the commenters was asking about the possibility of a variance, basically, I think, for height, for new construction. My feeling is, so currently with a detached ADU, it limited at 550 square feet. There's not much opportunity to really go to two stories. But with an 800 square foot limit, it seems like there's more room for that. Did you consider that and the possibility that that might thereby require make it more necessary basically to have greater height limit?
I think that we didn't want to affect the height limits too much from what they currently were, because they weren't raised as a specific barrier to ADUs throughout the evaluation process. We do have flexibility for new construction for the height up to a certain amount, so up to 25 feet. So there is 5 feet of flexibility as long as you're using the a specific roof pitch of 812. And then that was also the part that I mentioned, there's a confusing sidewall ratio that we've removed from in the current ordinance. So there's some flexibility there. And we didn't consider, I don't think that, because we've been able to, many ADUs have been able to accommodate an ADU within the existing regulation, adding additional floor area on the first floor. And a lot of our detached ADUs are above a garage anyway. So just adding additional floor area that might be for the ADU on the first floor. We didn't think that that necessitated increased height.
Thank you.
All right, Laura, and then ML, and just remember, this is our opportunity to ask some questions, and then we'll go to our deliberations.
Thank you. So following on Kurt's question about the height, you know, the commenter raised the example of a very steep lot and how that can affect the measurement from the lowest point a certain distance away. I'm not as familiar with building standards as the folks here who are architects and who work with that all the time, but have you seen that be an issue? Do you anticipate that being an issue with the larger sizes that are allowed? And if so, you know, can they get a variance for that through BOZA or through some other mechanism if that is really constraining on building an ADU simply because of the steepness of the lot?
Yeah, so we looked at the last few years, and we do have that existing standard that I mentioned that allows you to build up to 25 feet. And we found that, so we had about 200 ADUs approved in that time. And I think it was 7 or 8 that used that flexibility on height. And some of them were because of grading issues, because of how we measure height. Several of them were just design related, wanting to include the steeper pitched roof or trying to accommodate putting an ADU on top of an existing garage. So we think that that provides enough flexibility up to 25 feet. One of the issues with ADUs is that if the ADU were to, especially a detached ADU, if the ADU use is gone, suddenly you have a much larger garage than would otherwise be permitted. So it's a non-conforming structure without the ADU within it. So it just gets a little more complicated if we have these unique rules for ADUs that might not potentially always be an ADU. And also just hearing the concerns of reducing impact on neighboring properties, trying to keep the height as similar to what a typical garage would look like. That was what part of the focus as well.
And I'll add, there is a process for, you know, allowing additional height that's already in the code. So there on single family lots, you can go through a height modification for the principal structure or the accessory structure. Being under the zoning district maximum, it would be a staff level site review basically. So they would be treated the same as any other requests that we might get for more height.
Yeah, thanks, Carl.
Okay, thank you.
ML.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to riff on this height thing. So I'm not sure if I remember correctly, is the height requirement or the height limitation relative to the lowest point within 25 feet? Is that general zoning, or is that accessory dwelling particular, or where does that come from?
That is the general height measurement. And so one of the things that helps the ADU process be more efficient is trying to keep standards as similar to the rest of the code. That's part of the reasoning behind the floor area measurement being the same. And so we are using the same measurement of height for ADUs as we do for any structure, which is 25, the lowest point within 25 feet.
And is that, given a steep lot, is that requirement able to get varied through a BOZA process?
It's the process that Carl was mentioning, the administrative site height modification through a site review.
Right. And so that would look at whatever the constraint is that's needing the building to be higher just relative to that point, not necessarily higher. We're not looking for a 30 tall building or 25, even 25 foot, but just relative to that number. So there is that process built in with the variance.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Yep. Great to understand the clarity. So it's going from being its own little unique little standalone policy and now falls in with everything else in the big building review, right? Okay, thank you so much.
All right, any other questions at the moment for Lisa or Carl? Okay, so we'll start our deliberation. Staff has put 2 questions to us, but I think they left out a 3rd question, which is just some basic thoughts and feedback on the various elements of the proposal. So we'll go first through the 2 questions that Lisa posed, and then we'll talk more broadly. So does the planning board find that the proposed ordinance implements the adopted policies of the Boulder Valley Comp Plan? Does anyone have comments about that key question? Anyone? Mark, did you just raise your hand? I'm sorry. Yeah, Mark, and then Laura. Mark, you got to learn to use the little.
Yeah. I because I have notes and I want it to be. I don't like it when I'm speaking and I'm looking off this way because I think that's disconcerting for people. So I switched my stuff around.
Well, we do understand if you're looking at your notes.
Yeah.
Don't worry about us.
So I'm going to begin my comments by thanking staff for what I consider to be kind of threading the needle in terms of being responsive to the community goals, council's goals, and some community angst about this particular topic. But my comments, and I consider this a very successful planning department project. And I think the department, Lisa, especially with Carl, deserve kudos for bringing this here. And, you know, so as I looked at this at length, and I also appreciate the fact that every time I've been part of this particular topic, which is now 3 or 4 times now, because I was at the last HAB meeting, I continue to learn things. But I think that, yes, in fact, you have taken the BVCP to heart. And I spent some time today just on page 7 of the BVCP core values, and the 3 that come up, and you have cited specific policies, but I just look at the core values on page 7, and that is infill that supports evolution to a more sustainable urban form, great neighborhoods and public spaces, and a welcoming, inclusive, and diverse community. And so those, I think, you know, there's obviously a tension between those core values in trying to implement those in a policy like an ADU policy. But I think you have done that by balancing to a great degree. You balanced some concerns of the community with us reaching our goals and us being a welcoming, inclusive, and diverse community and having a more sustainable urban form, because I think Boulder will continue to evolve, and I hope that we continue to evolve towards a more sustainable urban form. And then to that particular point, that sustainable urban form definition on page 43, that revolves around, quote, daily needs met within easy access from home, work, school, services, or recreation without driving a car. And I can't think of a better housing type to, in locations like the Hill, in locations like downtown, Martin Acres, to having people that want to live without a car or car light, and having walkable access to home, work, school, services, and recreation. This is part of fulfilling that sustainable urban form. So in answer to the question, does it fulfill BVC policies? My answer is yes, and it does so very well, and you've done it in a well-balanced way, and I thank you.
Laura?
I second everything that Mark said. I think, Mark, you said it better than I'm going to. But I also want to thank Lisa and Carl for the very detailed and fantastic work that you have done here, trying to thread that needle, as Mark said. In terms of BVCP consistency, I would point to policy 7.02, affordable housing goals, 7.07, mixture of housing types, 7.10, housing for a full range of households, and 7.11, balancing housing supply with employment base, as some of the ones that this policy of trying to have more ADUs really checks the box. This really is a housing type that allows people who want to have an independent living space that maybe feels like a single family home or is shared with a single family home to live in Boulder. It allows people to have complete families, multi-generational living, take care of their senior relatives, take care of a dependent relative, dependent adults, or dependent maybe children just moving in. All of the things that we have talked about in the past, but I think is worth reminding the community that, you know, what makes our community strong is our ability to have a community that includes all kinds of people. And we are really lacking in spaces for a diversity of family types and a diversity of housing types. And this is one that is in high demand, and we don't really have a lot of supply. So I support the goal to increase our ADUs by removing barriers, making it easier for private property owners to provide this sort of housing type to the city. And I really think that you have done that here. You have accepted the mission and you have executed it beautifully of trying to figure out what are the things that are preventing private property owners from building these ADUs and providing them to the community. And I thank you for it.
ML.
Thank you. And yes, definitely kudos to Lisa and Carl. It hasn't been as long as some of the the initial ADU back in 2016, but thank you so much for keeping it clear and concise and precise. And the thing that I applaud most about this is that you are giving ADUs all the benefits of a use by right project. It's just like the big houses have had that. And I think it's great that now the little second houses fall into that use by right category. And I think that that is a really significant move by whether, I don't remember if that came direction from City Council or how that came, but a significant move in removing not only the barriers, but giving a level playing field to people who want a different way to live on their property. So great kudos to Lisa and Carl, and thank you for shepherding this project through to tonight.
Kurt, did you want to, there's your hand, Kurt.
Yeah, well, the others have been very articulate about ways in which this does further the BVCP goals, but none of those goals that were referenced, which all are very relevant, none of them talk about the need to house cars, right? And so I realized that this is not part of the scope of the project, but I really feel like if we were really trying to meet the goals of the BVCP, we would also be dealing with the parking requirements and eliminating or greatly reducing the parking requirements. So that's the one glaring way that I see that we are missing meeting BVCP goals.
Okay, thanks, Kurt. So I support that. I agree that you all have accomplished what the council wants. However, I do feel like a couple of the policy goals that you've pointed to are sort of, this is sort of a mixed bag in terms of accomplishing those goals, particularly Built Environment 2.10, which talks about preservation and support for residential neighborhoods. And the city will work with neighborhoods to protect and enhance neighborhood character and livability. And I really do hear what the folks who live on the Hill are talking about, because it is their lived experience that it is a neighborhood that is complex, and many blocks are very densely populated, and the addition of ADUs will add to that density. And I realize that that is what the folks who support ADUs unbounded want, but that isn't necessarily what makes for a livable family neighborhood. So I want to recognize the concerns that folks who live on the Hill and in Martin Acres have shared with us over the course of this discussion, not just in the last 48 hours. I realize that there's no actual tool available, and there are all kinds of arguments made for why the Hill should not be treated differently than any other neighborhood. But I think we need to acknowledge that this is a big change. And it's a big change in a neighborhood that is very affected by the student population. I mean, I always remind people that Boulder has the highest rate of renters under 23, and 65% of our renters are 23 or younger. So a goodly portion of, it's possible that a goodly portion of these new ADUs in that neighborhood will be rented to students. Nothing wrong with that, but it is a neighborhood that's already pretty saturated. And I just want to acknowledge the frustration of the folks who live there who are not students, because it is, I think we all have friends who have lived there and moved away to other neighborhoods just because it was a difficult place or a challenging place to bring up a family, if you have young kids. And then build environment policy 211, which identifies specifically the purpose of ADUs to increase long-term rental options in single family neighborhoods. And I keep going back to that statistic of from 27, I think it was actually from 2012 to 2021, which must have been the last time you all did the survey, or 2020, that the percentage of ADUs that are being used for long-term rentals dropped from 70-something% to 40-something%. And I'm sure there are multiple factors as to why that is. And I'm sure COVID has played a role and all that stuff. But in many ways, those ADUs that are being built are not actually being used for the housing purposes that the Boulder Valley Comp Plan wants them to be used for. And I know we don't really have a mechanism to guarantee that they're used, but I just want to point out that this is a marginal solution to a set of problems. And some of those problems are caused by the university. And what we really need is for the university to begin to solve some of its problems with housing. So I will leave it at that, because that's not what this discussion is about, but I just want to put that on the table because I think it is an issue here whenever we talk about housing. Any other comments on key issue number 1? All right, key issue number 2, does the planning board recommend any modifications?
Hey, Sarah, I'm sorry. So I did want to make, I'm realizing that we have these 2 key issues, and the second one, my additional comments don't really apply to the second. So I'm going to jump back on for a second and make a couple additional comments. And then.
Go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to acknowledge all of the emails, both this time and last time in January when we discussed this. And I want to acknowledge, I think we have some people listening in that, I acknowledge and sympathize and understand the frustrations of living in certain neighborhoods certainly that have some bad actors like on the Hill. When I was running for council, I spent time with Hill residents, Hill merchants, and I've lived on the Hill. I've also lived in Goss Grove and Martin Acres. And when you really read these emails, and you take their concerns to heart, you note that it's about parking, it's about noise, it's about trash, it's about parking, it's about weeds, and it's about parking. And you read this and you think, no one's saying, I hate housing. I hate a nice, quiet grad student living in my neighbor's, backyard ADU. They're talking about these issues. And I think that there is, we've collectively, the city of Boulder, have failed in two areas. And these two areas continue to warp housing policy, and that is parking and code enforcement. And I'd like this to be noted in the minutes that these two areas are drivers of warping our housing policy and keeping us from achieving many of our goals. Because I think we radically underpriced parking, and we placed it within the Department of Community Vitality, and it's keeping this underpricing of parking and the schizophrenic nature of us trying to reach climate goals while making free parking sacrosanct in the city right-of-way are at odds with each other. And it's very confusing to the population. It's very confusing to homeowners because we are at odds with ourselves on this. And I think that if we price parking fairly at a market rate on city property and treated it the way we should be treating it, we would do better. And I think we have radically undervalued the value of code enforcement to control the people that do create. There are strong impacts on the Hill with parties and noise, trash and glass. And I've spent time there with homeowners walking around and stepping on glass in front of houses and stuff. And it's a problem, but it's a code enforcement problem. And we give short shrift to our code enforcement department and to the complaints, the valid complaints of residents of those neighborhoods. And so those are the things that I think we have to separate from housing policy so that we can achieve our housing goals and we can act upon those two other things, parking and code enforcement. So now I'm done with my little speech. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Anyone else want to add something right now before we move on to key issue number 2? Okay, key issue number 2, does the planning board recommend any modifications to the draft ordinance? Hands up if you do. Oh, okay, I can see Kurt heading for his, like you must have your button up above somewhere. So Mark was first and then Kurt. Mark, you're muted. Mark, you're muted. You're still muted. There you go.
Okay, there we go. All right, I have one very small one, and that is on page 69. I hope it's still 69 of the revised packet. It's 69 of my packet, the original packet. I noted that under parking, we do not require any bike parking for an ADU without a garage. But we do require for a market rate unit, and maybe I'm misreading it, but I'd like clarification on this. We have an auto parking requirement. We do not have any bike parking requirements. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I think we should have a bike parking requirement. Again, as part of our, it's like a mini TDM plan for a single unit. If you want people to have lower impact on their neighbors and you want them to arrive without a car, but if you build an ADU and there's really not, and you build a small ADU because lot size, whatever it might be, and you don't give someone secure bike parking, then they're more likely to arrive by car. and have a car stored on the street. So I would suggest we change that to require bike parking for as part of the ADU requirement.
We can take a look at that, Mark, but I will point out that when we developed the bike parking regulations, we didn't have requirements for bike parking for single family homes or accessory dwelling units by virtue of the fact that there's usually garage space where the bike parking can be accommodated, whereas we needed to be more specific for attached dwelling units. But we can take a second look at that and see if we need to change the language.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
So just a quick question, Carl, does that need to be framed in some kind of amendment once we get to the motion, or can that be just note, you guys have noted it and we'll take a look?
I think it's up to the board, and we certainly will look at it either way, but if it's something that the board agrees on and feels strongly about, it could be added to the motion that we at least explore specific requirements for bike parking for ADUs.
Okay, but it would be different from what is required for single family homes, just at the time that we're trying to align the requirements for the 2 units on a parcel.
I think it relates to, there's language in the code already about garages being available for bike storage. So I think we just have to look at that again and see if that adequately accommodates ADUs to see if we need to make any tweaks.
All right, so Mark, if you want to think about how to, okay, Kurt.
I have a couple of points. One is fairly detailed, and it relates to the way the occupancy limit signage rule, which is in 10.3.20. It requires anyone with a rental permit to post the occupancy limit, I believe. But for an ADU, if you have a permit for an ADU, a rental permit for an ADU, the ADU per se does not have its own occupancy limit. And so it feels like that is not really, it's not a well-defined problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
oh, sorry.
My suggestion is to somehow, I guess, exempt ADUs from that requirement. Sorry, but you were going to say something.
From the posting requirement?
Yeah.
So the occupancy for ADUs is the same as the house would be. Like I said, there's that flexibility for additional dependents, but the ADUs are still subject to the occupancy of the whatever the site already has. So I think we could confirm with our rental licensing folks more about the posting and what the notice or the posting has to say. So that's something we can look into.
Right. It seems like if I live in a house in RL1 and the occupancy limit is 3 unrelated, and I'm alone in the house, then the occupancy limit in the ADU is 2. But
two unrelated, but it could
be
unrelated,
right? Yeah. But now if I get a roomer in the house and there are 2 unrelated in the house, then all of a sudden the occupancy limit in the ADU would become 1, and I'd have to change the sign, or I don't know. It seems like a strange situation. It's different from an apartment where the occupancy limit is always fixed.
Yeah, understood. I think we can talk with our rental licensing folks and see how that's written on ADU rental license postings and make sure, but it should reflect that the occupancy limit is for the entire property. And as whatever the situation in the main house changes, the ADU needs to change too, or will be subject to that too.
Yeah.
And Kurt,
and then,
Kurt,
sorry.
Wait, just a quick question. Is that something that you'd want to see as a written amendment or condition, or are you okay with it being an issue that you've raised with staff and they'll figure out how to address it? just so that we know when we get to the motion, like what else we want to incorporate.
Oh, I think that is a question for me or for Kurt?
No, it was a question for Kurt.
Okay.
Are you?
Oh, for me.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
Sorry about that.
Well, I think it sounded like Lisa was going to check with the code enforcement people and just clarify that. And so I'm fine with that part.
Okay, great. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, please. I just wanted to make sure that we were sort of keeping track of what we might want to.
Yes, thank you. Another thing that we didn't talk about is the prohibition on separate conveyance. And I know people feel strongly about this, but I don't understand why we prohibit separate conveyance, basically condoization of a house plus an ADU. We seem to want owner occupancy, right? But with a house plus an ADU, as the rules currently are, by definition, one of those units is not owner occupied if it's rented, right? Whereas if you allow for condoization, they can both be owner occupied, right? They can each be owned separately. And so it seems like it actually would be a benefit to the extent that you're interested in owner occupancy. Also, the middle income housing study determined that, you know, our greatest affordability challenge is not with rental housing, it's with for sale housing. And so allowing another opportunity to provide small, relatively inexpensive for sale housing seems to me a huge benefit. Also, if a house and an ADU were conveyed separately, the house would actually become more affordable because it now has less property associated with it. And again, this is different from subdivision, right? We're not creating a separate parcel. It's still all one parcel. It's just a condo association on the parcel. Whether it would actually be used, I don't know. But it seems strange that we prohibit that given our other stated goals. And so I'd just be interested in seeing if the board would be interested in taking that up as a possible thing to add.
So I'd like to respond to that. So first of all, I think it's outside the scope of this project and it would require additional exploration by staff and public comment and public engagement because we haven't had that conversation. So I think it's an idea to put on the table for future discussion, but I wouldn't suggest trying to include it here because that would be policy making on the fly without any type of analysis or evaluation or public input or, you know, compare and contrast to other cities. So that would, I would not be supportive of trying to add that in at this point. So that's my position on that. Laura?
So just, Kurt, since this is your first meeting, this did come up previously when we talked about ADUs, and council talked with staff about how to have a narrow scope of something that could be done with minimal, a consult level of public engagement and not full-blown public engagement to get some kind of interim changes done this year while we still have the same council before the elections. But there were many ideas that had put forward, that different council members put forward, that go beyond what we're looking at here in this package. And that included eliminating the parking requirement. It included condoization and separate ownership of ADUs and some other kind of big ideas that I think the direction from council was that is on the table for a future update of the ADU ordinance. You know, the ADU ordinance has been modified several times over the years. So they wanted to take this step and then look at the impacts and then maybe come back with some additional changes in a future project. That's my understanding anyway. And so for that reason, I agree with Sarah that I don't think that fits within the scope of this particular round, but I would certainly welcome that discussion in the future, hopefully while I'm still on planning board. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, thank you. I guess to me, maybe I'm sure I'm oversimplifying it. It seems like a code streamlining issue, but in reality, it's probably much bigger than that. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, anybody else specifically to the question of changes they might want to see into the motion? Okay, seeing no hands, I'm going to just open it up now. If folks have things they just really want to say that they haven't already said. Anyone have anything they want to add? Okay, I see no hands. I see Kurt thinking. Is there something you want to add? No, okay. All right, so I think it is time to go to the motion. Laurel, if you wouldn't mind returning to view. And once again, this is an ordinance now, a little different from the use review from before. Could you walk us through, oh wait, ML, you have your hand up. Sorry.
I'm just queuing up to make a motion. Go ahead.
Okay. Laurel, if you will just walk us through again how the motion process for an ordinance.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, I invite David, since this is the project he's been working on, if he wants to chime in or change anything I'm saying, he's more than welcome to. So just again, as a reminder, in the memo packet or in the packet, the planning staff includes suggested motion language, which you are, of course, welcome to change. And I or whoever the attorney is representing can help change that. So there's suggested motion language in there. So say, for example, ML, a board member Robles wants to give a motion. She can go ahead and do that. Say it's a suggested motion language. That would be a first move to make that motion. We could have that friendly amendment. If anybody wants to make a slight tweak to that, we can do that next. If there are no friendly amendments, we can go to a second. And once the second is done, then Vice Chair Silver will go ahead, or Chair Silver, sorry. Chair Silver will go ahead and repeat that motion, and then it will be open for discussion. If you want to make amendments after discussion, that is also an option. And if we get to that point, we can talk about that. Otherwise, you can have discussion and then vote on the motion.
Okay. All righty. Does someone want to make the motion? I believe I see ML with her hand up.
Yes, please. So I'll just read it the way it's written, the suggested motion language. Planning board recommends, I move that planning board recommend that city council adopt ordinance 8571, amending section 4-20-18, rental license fee, Title 9 land use code, and Title 10 structures, BRC 1981, to update the regulations for accessory dwelling units.
Okay, does anyone have a friendly? So Mark, do you want to, Mark?
I do.
Okay.
Sarah, and thank you for prompting me to decide whether or not it was just my comment to staff or actual motion language. And so I actually disagree with this friendly amendment concept, but I'm going to take advantage of it tonight. And so we can
Robert's rules, like you can take it up with Robert's rules.
Right, exactly. We can deal with that another time, but since that's our mode tonight. So I would add the motion that ML just read ends with the accessory dwelling units, period. I would add, and I'm happy to send this, I've drafted this as an email, additionally, comma, planning board recommends that planning department staff include a flexible requirement for bike parking in the updated ADU requirements. Would you like me to send that?
Devin, have you typed that out?
I think I got that on the fly. Thank you.
Okay.
So point of order, I feel like that goes beyond a friendly amendment. Like friendly amendment is stuff like there's a typo, or I prefer the word planning board strongly recommends, or something like that.
David shows up. Yay.
I feel like that's an amendment, and that's totally
David,
fair game, but I feel like that goes beyond a friendly.
David, you're muted.
The only thing that I would add, and I would ask Carl to check my math on this, but it does seem like when I looked at the parking requirement for bicycles, if you have a garage, there's no parking requirement for bicycles. If you don't have a garage, there is a bicycle parking requirement for dwelling units. So just in terms of just clarifying what's already in the code for dwelling units now.
Okay.
Carl, was I reading that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. I don't know that it's entirely clear how it's written now. It seems like any accessory dwelling unit, whether there's a garage or not, the requirement is no requirement. So maybe we, again, just need to go back to that and clarify the language that, you know, if there's a garage, there's no requirement. But if there's no garage, that there would be maybe 2 spaces required. So I don't know that that's entirely clear right now, but we can look to fix that.
So, but if the principal dwelling unit has a garage and the accessory dwelling unit, which has to be, which is let's say it's a detached, or let's say it's even attached, but it has to have lockable and separable entrances. I'm envisioning you have a principal dwelling unit, and the people living in the owners can live in the ADU, but likely the owners are living in the principal dwelling unit, and you have an ADU without a garage, which I would encourage. I don't think we need garages taking up square footage in many of our ADUs. But the principal dwelling unit, they're like, no, you're not coming in my garage. That's where I keep my workshop or whatever it might be. And consequently, you don't have actual secure bike parking for the accessory dwelling unit.
Mark, can I make a suggestion then? So we don't want to make policy on the fly. So maybe, and I think Laura's right that this is not really a friendly, but it's actually an amendment or a condition. And so
or another motion completely.
Or another motion completely, but have it, I would maybe ask a recommendation that staff look into the possibility of bicycle parking requirements.
So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to withdraw my friendly amendment.
Okay.
I would like us to go ahead and second and debate the amendment. I'll either consider making an amendment to the motion, which I think is the proper procedure, or make a second amendment, which I think is also a completely proper procedure.
Okay. All right. So do we have a second for the motion? Somebody make a second.
I will second ML's motion.
Thank you, Laura. All right. So I'm now going to read the motion. We can then discuss it, and or Mark, you can then follow with your proposed amendment to the motion. Planning Board recommends that City Council adopt Ordinance 8571, amending Section 4-20-18, rental license fee, Title 9, Land Use Code, and Title 10, Structures, BRC 1981, to update the regulations for accessory dwelling units. Any discussion of this motion, or is there an amendment to this motion?
I'm not going to ask for an amendment to that motion. I actually support that being a clean motion, and we'll date my motion later.
All right, so let's, are we ready to vote on this motion? Am I seeing a nod?
So can I just talk a little bit about Robert's Rules of Order, just
yes, please, David.
Because I enjoy it. So typically when you have a motion, so what was just made was the main motion. Now, if you want to change the main motion, now would be the time that you would suggest those amendments to the main motion, which I think, Mark, that would be in order for what you're suggesting. And then anyone who wants to put an amendment to the main motion on the table, those can all be debated separately and voted on. And you basically vote on the main motion last so that you understand completely everything that goes into what the board's recommendation is.
Okay, so the recommendation here is that Mark propose an amendment.
Yeah, that he would amend the motion by stating the planning board further recommends that we do X, Y, and Z.
Okay, so.
But I'll leave that to Mark.
Okay.
Okay, I love someone with more knowledge about Roberts than me, because that's almost darn near everyone. So so David, do I say I'd like to propose an amendment?
Yeah.
I propose an amendment, and it's the same amendment, the same language with one word change that I just said. It would read, additionally, comma, planning board recommends that planning department staff research a flexible requirement for bike parking in the updated ADU requirements.
Okay, that sounds pretty good. Now, if I were the chair, I would ask for a second.
Can I suggest a slight tweak, Mark, to your wording? Rather than saying you want the staff to research this, say you want the staff to consider adding this.
That's like a friendly amendment.
That's the friendly amendment to your amendment.
Okay, all right. Let me change that language.
Yeah, and Mark, you can either accept or reject her friendly amendment. Yeah.
Right, and I accept her friendly amendment, replacing the word research with consider adding. Would you like me to restate my proposed amendment? ML's nodding yes, so like, okay, I'm going to restate it. Additionally, comma, planning board recommends that planning department staff consider adding a flexible requirement for bike parking in the updated ADU requirements.
First, before I ask for a second, Devin, did you get that?
I got it in full. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have a second for that amendment? We do not seem to have a second for that amendment.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Mark, when you say that staff consider, so entertain the possibility that staff might in fact consider it and then choose not to bring a bike option forward.
Yeah, I think at this late stage that I am not. I think it. There are always things that sound great at 9:20 on Tuesday night that, under different light with greater expertise than I can offer, might create a problem. And what I don't want to do is to slow down or delay or imperil passing of this main motion. I consider this important, but I consider the original motion language also of greater importance. So I'm trusting enough and don't consider it the biggest issue. So that's why I'm going to leave it up to staff to consider adding. And that's why I also use the word flexible, a flexible requirement for bike parking and the updated ADU requirements.
Kurt, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm definitely supportive of the concept, but I am concerned about the exact fears that Mark expressed about delaying this process. And so to me, it feels a little more appropriate as something to be added to the list for next time.
Okay. So I'm going to, Laura.
Sorry, just quickly, I agree with Kurt. Mark, I'm completely supportive of the concept. I don't know how it works with, I don't think we have bike parking requirements for single family dwelling units. And so I don't know how that works with an accessory dwelling unit. I totally get where you're coming from. For me, I'm happy to just put that in staff's court and say, you know, if this makes sense, consider adding it. And if they think that it's not the right time or wouldn't work, I'm okay with that. I don't need to see it as a motion personally or as an amendment formally. That gives it a kind of weight that I'm not sure I would support at this time of night.
I want to acknowledge that. I also want to ask Carl and David, I thought I just heard that if there is not a garage, then there is a bike parking requirement. Is that true? And Lisa, I ask Lisa, I mean, whomever.
Well, the way it's drafted now is it's a dwelling unit without a private garage requires 2 per unit. And then it says the accessory dwelling unit has none. So I'm assuming that the way that it would get applied now is that they would say for the property, the ADU and the single family home, if you don't have a garage, there has to be 2 parking spaces for the main unit.
Parking spaces, not bike spaces.
Bike parking. Well, bikes are vehicles too. So
just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, thank you. But yeah, so, you know, I think that we could look at it quickly and Carl can virtually kick me under the table if he needs to. I don't think that the drafting is difficult here. And just to kind of speak to how we would deal with this. So we're turning around to council pretty quickly. So we would probably give it a pretty quick look. And we would certainly convey the planning board's concerns and recommendations to the council. And it would be combined with ours in terms of whatever solution we could come up with on a short time frame.
Okay. Since I don't have a second and I'm not, I don't see someone jumping for a second, I'm going to declare victory that staff's going to look into it and I'm going to withdraw my amendment and we can all go on and vote on the motion.
Mark, thank you for that. And I'm very impressed that Lisa, David, and Carl know the code backwards and forwards and know exactly where to reference every little tittle and tattle. So thank you very much. And David, it's nice to see your face again.
Yep. Good to be back.
So do we want to have a discussion now about the motion that for which there has been a second, or are we ready to go vote? Vote, thumbs up, vote. We're ready to vote. Okay. Did I already read this again? I don't think I did. All right. Oh no, I did read it again. Yes. Yes. Okay. We're ready to vote. Kurt, yay or nay?
Yay.
Laura?
Yes.
ML?
Yay.
Yay. Mark?
Yes.
And Sarah is a yes. All right. Congratulations. Done. Our hands are washed of this. You get to now take it to City Council. Thank you guys very, very much. Okay, we are now going to move into matters, and before Laura goes into the letter on the airport, Mark had sent an email to all of us about liaison assignments, and because 2 of our board members are missing, I emailed with him, and he's okay with putting that off until our next meeting during matters, so that everybody is at the table to talk about where they'd like to, what assignments they'd like to take on. So I just wanted to put that out there. Mark, you have a question or comment?
I do, and that is simply that since we are putting this off, and I was the John's alternate for the housing advisor. No, I'm sorry. I was, I'm the primary on DAB, which is next week. The DAB meeting is Wednesday, the 12th, and I have a conflict. And so, and John was my alternate on the DAB meet for DAB. So I would like to see if anyone is willing to attend a DAB meeting. I find them fascinating, and you know, I'm no architect, but anyway, I find them fascinating, but I can't attend this one, and John's no longer with us. So
it looks like ML just volunteered herself.
I'm happy to attend the DAB meeting as Mark.
Okay, excellent. All right,
okay.
Problem solved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next matter is Laura's letter about the airport community conversation. Hopefully everybody had a chance to read it and is ready to hear from her and discuss any changes they might want to make.
Okay, well, did everybody have it? Thank you, Sarah, for queuing that up. Did everybody have a chance to read it? Kurt's a yes, ML's a yes, Sarah's a yes, Mark's a yes. Okay, so everybody's here tonight had a chance to read it. I guess I would ask the chair, would you like me to walk through it for the purpose of like public transparency and anybody who may be watching the recording or might be still with us? It is in the packet. It went into the packet yesterday morning.
I don't know. Laurel, do we need to go through it line by line for public engagement, for public transparency, or is it okay for us just to discuss as is?
Yeah, it's up to you on that. Since it was included in the packet, it is open and available to the public. So I would say it is transparent. You guys have shown what it is, but up to you whether or not you want to go through.
Laura, why don't you go through it as you would like to?
Okay, I will try to recap it briefly just to try to tee up our conversation. I think, as folks know, I am the liaison from Planning Board to the Airport Community Conversation. The Airport Community Conversation is a fairly swift public engagement process that is meant to be a precursor to the Airport Master Plan update. It does consist of a working group that has been assembled and will have 5 meetings. There will be 3 open houses and there will be a Be Heard Boulder survey. And anybody who's been following along knows that from the beginning, before this group was conceived, back in August when we saw the capital improvement program and we saw that there was going to be an airport master plan update, I in particular, but I think the whole planning board has been trying to uplift BVCP 6.23, which says that at the time of the next airport master plan update, the city will work with the community, that's the language it uses, will work with the community to reassess the potential for developing a portion of the airport for housing and neighborhood serving uses. And I don't think I need to recap for this board why we feel that looking at this piece of land and a long-range planning sense and assessing it for housing and neighborhood serving uses is something that this board is interested in seeing the city do in partnership with the community. And so the crux of the issue here and why we're writing a letter to council and the city manager about it is that the way that staff have scoped and designed this airport community conversation, and that's the term that they use for this whole process that includes the working group, the open houses, and the survey is the community conversation. The way that has been scoped does not include developing any scenarios or any description of housing potential on the airport site. Staff is envisioning this as more of looking at the airport as an airport facility and what is the future of that facility. And it can include talking about decommissioning the airport potentially, but not look in any detail at what might come after. So no analysis of housing potential is included in this particular conversation. I think that is a cause for some great concern, especially because the airport master plan process itself cannot consider changing the land use to housing. The airport master plan process, as folks may know, is a basically a paint by numbers kind of thing that comes from the FAA. It is conducted according to the FAA process very strictly, and it focuses on airport services and facilities, and in particular capital improvements. So it's meant to be basically a 10-year capital improvement plan and looking at the operations of the airport. So the idea that we're going to go into that process without having done what the BVCP says we're going to do, which is look at the potential for housing and neighborhood serving uses, is pretty concerning. I'm going to go into one more detail, which is that decommissioning an airport is quite difficult, and the FAA does not like to let communities do that. One of the reasons why you can do that is if the airport is in a state of disrepair and requires more than normal maintenance, requires rehabilitation, reconstruction, rebuilding, and lots of cash injected to do that. That is one of the circumstances under which the FAA will say, okay, we'll abandon this airport and put our money somewhere else, potentially. It's possible. It still requires a negotiation. It's not easy to do. But right now, given that our airport is in a state of disrepair, that's a stronger negotiating position for the city. And so going into a capital improvement plan and saying, we're going to do all these things to upgrade the airport without considering that long range, what are we going for? Do we want to decommission the airport and do housing? Let's have that conversation first before we put a lot of money into making this a better airport, especially in a capital improvement kind of way. Seems to make sense from a planning perspective. All that to say, what I'm recommending as the liaison is asking council to give some direction to staff to reconsider how they're scoping this process and to add scenarios, add an analysis, a preliminary analysis that looks at a housing alternative for the airport's future and looks at a hybrid housing airport scenario and puts that out for community consideration and analyzes it on a level playing field with any other scenario. That, I think, is our primary recommendation. And then I also give some other recommendations at the end. And I say I want to really acknowledge Sarah for working on this letter with me. Sarah read it closely and offered edits, so it's a joint effort, although I want to take the blame for anything in here that doesn't make sense. So there are some fallback scenarios of if council does not agree to make this a full process that does look at housing and housing potential on the site. In terms of developing scenarios, which I guess has a particular planning meaning of what is a scenario. One alternative is that we could back off from the idea of a scenario that is equally developed and equally analyzed and say instead, okay, well, we should at least have a narrative about housing that we can go out to the community with that talks about what's the housing potential on this site, how many units. We would probably aim for affordable housing, all of that kind of stuff, develop a 15-minute walkable neighborhood, a narrative description, which would be much easier and decrease the burden on staff, wouldn't be quite as robust of an analysis, but that's kind of a fallback if staff push back on having scenarios. That is mentioned in the memo. And then the third fallback is, all right, if council wants to completely exclude housing from this process in any kind of meaningful way, then they should at least get really, really clear on how is housing going to be considered. Is that a separate process? How does that align with whatever comes out of this community conversation and the airport master plan? And then I have a fourth recommendation that no matter what we do, staff need to be really, really clear about communicating transparently, proactively, and neutrally about this commitment in BVCP 6.23 to assess the potential for housing. Because I think there are a lot of stakeholders of various affiliations that might hope it'll just go away and that we're not really committed to it. And I would like to have that commitment reaffirmed. So sorry, that was probably a longer winded explanation than I needed to give, but I wanted to kind of walk through what's in the memo and where are we headed. We're hoping that council will give direction to staff to not separate out housing, not put it off to some indefinite future, not go ahead with this airport master plan update in the absence of taking a good hard look at housing potential. I'll stop there and say any questions first. Are there any questions from either what I just said or what's in the memo, and then maybe we'll go to anything that you want to change or add in the memo.
Go ahead, ML. Okay, so the only thing I thought the argument you just made about the you talk in the memo about, or you write in the memo about the financial costs of revitalizing an airport. But I felt like you made, in your comments to us, you made a really powerful comment about the complexity of going through an airport master plan and revitalizing an airport, and that I think that complexity is a valuable argument on behalf of the objective, which is to have city council sit up and take notice and possibly reconsider the scope, or not redirect, but expand the direction to staff. That's all. That was my only comment based on your presentation to us.
Thank you. And when you say the complexity, is there something in particular that you want to add to the memo?
No, you just meant, I just thought it was a powerful point, and one that I don't recall specifically being made in the memo. I mean, you talk about the expense of it, but you don't really talk about what it's going, that it's just as complex to revitalize as it is to decommission. Like, I mean, that's essentially what I heard you saying. And I think that is a powerful argument for encouraging a widening of the scope so that staff does offer up multiple scenarios, including housing hybrid, or just a revitalization. That was my basic point.
Okay, I'm going to write that down. So the complexity of revitalizing an airport.
Yeah.
Okay. Were there other folks that have questions about what was written?
ML, you had raised your hand. Was there something you wanted to say? There was something you wanted to say. I know.
I'm not sure when's the right time, but you know, the thing that, and I don't see any staff people here from this project. I think speaking to what is going to sort of tip the interest of council to expand the scope of the community conversation might happen around, do we know who does the airport currently serve? I mean, how many local businesses use it? How many local individuals use it? And how many non-local? Is this a facility that is there? People come from elsewhere to use it? What's the number? I've heard 100 and something is the number of people that use the airport. I think it's important to kind of give some perspective of, we've got however many acres, it's acres, yes, of land.
It's like 140 or something.
A significant
178 or 179, depending on who you ask.
A significant number of acres, and what percent of the citizens of Boulder, the residents of Boulder, are benefiting from the current use? And in a sort of broad way, it's just like, wow, how many people could benefit from a alternate use to an airport? So if this is a public property and a public discussion, then I think the affected people, right? We're talking about 120 people that might have to find a different airport, or what? What does that look like? I think it's unclear as to the impact of the users, the current users and the potential future users. And I think that would be a compelling piece of data to bring to the table that would I think, compel city council to say, hey, we could have a different impact, a greater impact, if we take this other path. So I don't see that information on here, and I'm wondering if it makes sense to try to get it on there.
I have some thoughts about that, but Mark, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you. So ML, I think those are excellent questions that are well within the scope of the working group. But the matter at hand is we have now this very moment to adopt a letter urging council to broaden the scope of inquiry so that your questions are answered as well as other parties' questions are answered, that the intent and the concern that Laura has brought to us is that the scoping and the questions being asked are too narrowly defined. And so whether it's 120 or 240, whatever it might be for pilots and acres and that sort of thing, those are things that aren't really addressed at the heart of Laura's concern and other community members' concern. I don't know if you read Macon Cowell's letter that he sent, similar, and I've read other communication from other community members, again, all about the scoping. And so I think that focusing on the scoping is what we need to do tonight. And I also want to emphasize that I would like to see us, as best we can, unanimously adopt a letter tonight so that can get sent off and be acted upon, because the clock is ticking with this working group. So so any edits that we have, commas, periods, word insertions, but they have to advance the cause of the letter, which is broaden the scope of inquiry so that the community feels that their questions have been fulfilled by the working group.
Yeah, I think I was trying to give some teeth to that very thing. You know?
Yeah, I think, ML, as I understand your point, is that I'm going to go out on a limb here and say right now this letter is long and it's dry and it doesn't grab the attention, and that a hook like talking about the fact that the airport is 179 acres that serves a very small, relatively small number of people, a fraction of a percentage of Boulder's population. If you trust the airport manager's statistics, which I do, John Kinney has been quoted as saying that it's about 125 people that regularly use the airport, some of whom are local, some of whom I'm sure are probably not. And that you know, it has housing potential for thousands of units potentially. My only concern about adding that is that the letter's already really long. I'm not sure exactly where it would go. And I do think that City Council already knows that. There have been several City Council members who have been beating this drum for many years. Lisa Morzell for many years, Mark Wallach for many years. I'm pretty sure everybody who's sitting on council currently knows that the airport serves a very small population and that the housing potential is quite large. So for me, it's not a priority to try to find a way to put that in here, but I totally hear your point about I do think that whatever we do, if we adopt this letter tonight, when it goes to council, it needs to be like an attachment, and there needs to be a short, catchy email that basically makes the point, hey, we're asking council to hear our concerns about the way this project is scoped and consider giving direction to staff to include housing, which is not currently considered, so that they have a reason to open it up and read it.
So I would, do you mind, Mark, if I would say it's fine as is, and ignore my comments from earlier because it is long and it's fine as is. And I personally am good with giving you the go ahead to send it out. Mark, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I am as well. And I'm even concerned that the drafting of an email, if we don't do it now and don't do it as a group and we portray it as from planning board, I would just as soon we say we have an email that says the planning board drafted and unanimously agreed to the following memo. Thank you for reading. And the memo should speak for itself, and we shouldn't have to have another drafting process if we're going to be positional in our or additional in our email.
I honestly think it would be okay. I'm sorry, Sarah.
Kurt has his hand up, that's all.
I was just going to say that I thought that the letter was very well written. So thank you to Laura and Sarah for drafting that. It is a little long, but it's very thorough, which is great. But I don't have any input on how best to convey it to council.
Laura, go ahead.
So I have talked with Hella about my liaison role, and in general, just you know, being a citizen with who still has freedom of speech. I do think that it would be okay for me to write a cover letter that comes from me as the liaison, saying, please read the attached letter that was approved by the planning board on this date with a vote of this, and here's the people who were absent. So they know that the cover email comes from me and the letter is approved by planning board.
All right, so unless someone wants to add a comma or a dash or a phrase or something, why don't we give either a thumbs up or a thumbs down to the letter so Laura can move forward with that, and we can thumbs up, thumbs up. All right, so it's 5-0, and please note that 2 of our members were absent, so that it doesn't appear to be, for some reason, either not unanimous. It doesn't call into question the absence of 2 people.
Yeah.
All right.
Can I ask a question of the attorney? Would it be appropriate to see if Lisa or George would like to sign on in absentia? We could say this was approved by a 5-0 vote on this night. These 2 members were absent, and if they so choose, they could lend their support after the fact.
Yes. Yeah, that would be definitely fine. Don't group email them though.
Don't
email them. Just send one and one
separately. Yeah. Okay. I'll check in with George and Lisa and see if they're comfortable with that. There might be any number of reasons why they might not want to do that, but if they do, I would like to give them the opportunity to sign on.
Well, and George is apparently in some remote location on vacation with his family, so you may not even be able to reach him.
Oh, okay. Maybe I should just go ahead with the 5-0. Okay, I'll do that just to move forward expeditiously, because the next meeting of this working group is in next week, April 13th.
Does anyone, thank you, Laura, very much. You did a great job. Awesome, awesome, awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for your help, Sarah, and thank you everybody tonight.
I just added some commas. That was it, or took out some commas. Are there any other matters from board members? Nope. Laurel has a matter, and then I'll ask Charles if he has anything. Laurel.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate you guys welcoming me in to being a part of the planning board team. Wanted to let you know that I will be assisting Hella in planning board matters. So if you do have questions for us, you're welcome to call either one of us. But if you are going to email us, it'd be great if you could email both of us, and one of us will get back to you. And you'll notice us copying each other just so we're all on the same page. So I thought I would say that on the record, and I'm looking forward to working with you all.
All right, thank you, Laurel, very much. Charles, do you have anything for us?
No matters from staff this evening.
Okay, great. And Devin, just one question to you. Oh, a question to Devin, and then we'll go to you, Mark. Laura mentioned a meeting where you're going to remind us how to do motions. I do not have that on my calendar. When is that?
So that is on the calendar and scheduled for April 25th. Okay. Yeah, we're still working to get the actual foundations for the material covered, but yeah, it's in the calendar for April 25th.
Oh, so that's at our planning board meeting on April 25th. Okay, correct. Not a separate meeting. Okay,
correct.
Cleared up. Mark, you raised your hand, and then Laura.
Yeah, I just was going to request that Laurel send to all of us an email saying exactly what she just said about copying her and Hella, so that I have all of her contact info. I don't know that I don't have an email from you, but I don't think I do. So I would love to just get an email, and it makes it easy for me to put you in my contacts. Thank you.
Yes, happy to do that.
Okay, and Laura.
I just want to offer the opportunity for any planning board members or folks who might be listening who would like to experience this airport community conversation in person. The first Airport Community Working Group open house is going to be April 11th. So next Tuesday from 4 to 7 p.m. It is on a drop-in basis. You can stay as little or as long as you want. I'm assuming they will be providing some information and soliciting some early input. So I would welcome everybody to, I will send around the link to the page, but if you just Google the Airport Community Conversation, you will find a link to the open house. I apologize that I don't have that information at the tip of my tongue. It's not an easy answer. It was some address I wasn't familiar with.
Okay. All right. Anything, does anyone else have anything they really want to say tonight before we adjourn? Okay, welcome, Kurt. Thanks for joining us. And you did awesome, as we all knew you would. I'm sure things will get more disruptive going forward, but you know, ease into it.
I'll work on being more disruptive. Thank you all.
All right. All right. We are adjourned and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Have a great night. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Night.